Good morning, I'm Lauren Baker.
Great to see everybody this morning. I'm Tanner Holbrook.
We are now entering day 9 and the 4th day of jury deliberations in the trial of former Grand Rapids police officer Christopher Schurr. Schurr is charged with second-degree murder in the killing of Patrick Leoya in 2022. It's been a very long couple of days, but here we are still waiting.
Yeah, we certainly are. It's one of those things that I think we're all just kind of waiting with bated breath a little bit to see if there's going to be any result. I know the last couple of days we were all kind of hoping for some answer one way or the other. Again, we had those jury deliberations. The first day they went into a deadlock. The judge saying, oh, nope, we got to go back and try again. And now we are, I think, which might be a little bit of a promising point here, is that it has taken a while for them to come back and say anything to the judge in terms of, hey, we're deadlocked again, or we need help of something, you know.
Yeah.
I think there might be some discussions happening going on right now that might indicate that, okay, maybe there is some productive chatting going on.
It'll be interesting to see what the judge decides now that we didn't see the jury yesterday, if we see them today. Obviously, when we first saw them, I believe it was on Tuesday, she said that they had been not deliberating long enough and told them to go back to the drawing board. We didn't hear from them yesterday. So if they come back again today and say that it is deadlock, I'm curious to see what will happen.
Yeah, I know. It is one of those things where we have just been watching this kind of go on for days and days and days. And again, when we have that deadlock jury, it's not something that we're being indicated by that the jury is indicating one way or the other that they've got a verdict, you know. When they say that they're deadlocked, that we're told by our experts that this is not at all an indication of which way the jury is going to go. And of course, we have some a soundbite of when the judge was reading that deadlock. Why don't we go ahead and take that right now and listen to what the instructions were as the deliberations came back into the chambers a couple days ago as they were getting ready to go back into those deliberations. Let's listen.
All right, welcome back, and you may be seated. It's my understanding, jurors, that you have returned from deliberations indicating that you believe you cannot reach a verdict. I'm going to ask you to please return to the jury room and resume your deliberations in the hope that after further discussion you will be able to reach a verdict. As you deliberate, please keep in mind the guidelines I gave you earlier. Remember, it is your duty to consult with your fellow jurors and try to reach agreement, if you can do so without violating your own judgment. To return a verdict, you must all agree, and the verdict must represent the judgment of each of you. As you deliberate, you should carefully and seriously consider the views of your fellow jurors. Talk things over in a spirit of fairness and frankness. Naturally, there will be differences of opinion. You should each not only express your opinion, but also give the facts and the reasons on which you base it. By reasoning the matter out, jurors can often reach agreement. If you think it would be helpful, you may submit to my clerk a written list of the issues that are dividing or confusing you. It will then be submitted to me. I will attempt to clarify or amplify the instructions in order to assist you in your further deliberations. When you continue your deliberations, do not hesitate to rethink your own views and change your opinion if you decide it was wrong. However, none of you should give up your honest beliefs about the weight or effect of the evidence only because of what your fellow jurors think or only for the sake of reaching agreement. So at this time, I'm going to have my clerk come around and take you back to the jury room, and we'll see you soon, hopefully.
And I wanted to address some comments that we've seen on Facebook
in
regards to this. Some people have commented saying, you know, it's clear that they don't know where they want to go. Let it be a mistrial. Why is the judge asking them to, you know, continue deliberations? One thing that, just to clarify from our experts, just because they're in a deadlock doesn't mean they're all in a deadlock. It could be everyone on one page and one person. It could be two people. We don't know exactly where they are. We also don't know where they are in that deadlock. It really could be between second degree and manslaughter, innocent. There's so many variations. And it's actually pretty normal for a judge to ask the jury to continue to deliberate if they haven't deliberated for a long time. And they hadn't at that point. So we don't want anyone to think that the judge is trying to like push something into this situation or trying to come up with a certain conviction or innocent you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
outcome.
An
outcome. Yeah,
that,
the outcome.
Is a premature outcome.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just this is a very complicated situation, and like Andrew said, Andrew Rodenhouse, an attorney. If we have to go through this trial again, that's more resources that we have to use to redo this whole entire trial. So we're not going to continue to see the judge. He's not going to drag this on for a long time. It is very common though for a judge after the first time to say, go back and continue deliberating.
Yeah, it's one of those things that this is back to Andrew's point 2 weeks ago now when the jury was just being selected, that this is a very patriotic duty that they have to perform here. We're talking about the jurors specifically. This is a patriotic duty that they have to perform because they are called and they are selected, these 14, now 12, because we did dismiss those 2 alternates, but these 14 people were selected out of a pool of 200 people, which is larger than normal. And they were selected to do this patriotic duty to judge their peer. And he says, this is one of the most patriotic things that a jury can do as a citizen, not only of Kent County, but of the United States and of Michigan. So it is one of those things that to your point, I actually think the longer we're seeing these deliberations go on indicates, I would think, more productive discussions in a verdict direction. So at least sounds like they're trying, and at least sounds like that they're taking the judge's words into account and saying, we've got a fair process here. You should be able to create a fair decision and a productive and also a blunt conversation around this entire trial.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it. Obviously, we've talked about the jury, the makeup of the jury, what it looks like, and how maybe their experiences and unknown biases will come into play. Obviously, they're going to judge this as fair as possible, but we all have very different experiences, and so it'll be interesting to see how they decide to come out with this this outcome. I'm curious to see, we know that we have crews outside right now, just tapping in with our producer, not ready just yet, but we'll hopefully be able to see what's been happening so far this morning. We do have some sound though on the deadlock, and I spoke to Andrew Rodenhouse and Tanya Kraus-Phelan about this deadlock. Take a listen.
I'm not surprised, especially given the nature of the case. It's not, we would say it's not uncommon to have a hung or a deadlock jury. The judge did give the jury the instruction that, look, it's not just done. You're going to go back, and you guys have to try to do this. I mean, think about it from the court's perspective. It's like, look, if you guys are just like, if you could just talk a little bit longer, someone else in the community is going to have to come in and try and judge this case, and it's going to take up a tremendous amount of resources. And so you guys should try to resolve whatever differences you have and come to a verdict. At the same time, the judge is also telling them that, look, if you've got a strong conviction one way or the other, we're not asking you to set aside a strong conviction that you might have. And so it's a delicate situation. I would say that it's uncommon from the standpoint that it's not typically how juries go, but it's common enough that the courts deal with it on a regular basis.
And Tanya, I'd love to hear from you. You actually talked with us about a hung or deadlock jury yesterday. Are you surprised that this has happened at this point in the trial?
Well, the idea of a jury being deadlocked or hung is not an uncommon phenomenon. However, I'm a little surprised that with just this short amount of time deliberating that they've sent a note to the judge that they're deadlocked. There was a lot of expert testimony for them to go through in this particular case, and that really surrounded the main issue in the trial. So I thought that they would at least deliberate through the rest of the day and perhaps reach a verdict tomorrow or Thursday. So the concept of a hung jury, not surprised, not uncommon. that it was this soon into the deliberations is a little surprising.
Do you think that that maybe indicates how difficult it is for these jurors to make this decision? Like you said, it's basically only been a full day comparing all the hours that they deliberated. Does that give us an indication that this verdict might not come as easy as some may think it could have?
I certainly think so. I mean, this is a profound case in the sense of what's at stake here, right? And a lot of people had formed opinions before this trial even started. And I'm not suggesting the jurors had, but I'm just saying this case was pending for 3 years, and certainly within the community, a lot of opinions were formed. And so there are a lot of eyes on this. And as you said, we've all been waiting sort of anxiously to know what the jury will do. But that they came to this point so quickly indicates to me that there are some people on the jury that have some pretty strong convictions on what the outcome should be. So whether continued deliberations will help them reach a unanimous verdict or whether it will further divide them and continue on to a deadlocked jury is yet to be seen.
Andrew, I want to also ask you about the timing. We've only really seen a day fully full of deliberations. I just wonder, is there a possibility that they could come back tomorrow again and say, listen, we are still deadlocked, you know, we can't come to a conclusion? Or should we be expecting them to deliberate a couple more days before they come to a conclusion?
Well, there's no way anyone could ever know that. I was involved with a case very early on in my career where the jury was deliberating, and they had deliberated all the way till about 4:30 on a Friday, and they said that they were deadlocked. And as I was watching the jurors leave the courtroom, it became obvious to me who the holdout was. And then about 15 minutes later, they came back out and they had a unanimous verdict at that point in time. And so it could be short. It's in that particular instance, it was just like 10 minutes, or it could go on for a couple of days and they could still be deadlocked. So we have no idea what's going on inside that jury room, and it's designed to be that way. And so we don't know. We're just going to have to wait and see.
I also, Andrew, want to talk to you about that motion. We just saw the defense put another motion for a mistrial, and the judge immediately denied that motion. Can you kind of walk us through it? It seemed like it was a quick reaction to what happened and a quick reaction by the judge to say, no, they need to keep deliberating.
Yeah, that's just again, if you remember us talking about standard motions practice, that it's motions that are made routinely. That was one of those types of motions. They're just doing that to preserve the issue for appeal.
Very interesting. Of course, we've heard those sound bites many times, but I think it's important to show everybody that, you know, we have been following this process, and so have these experts talking just about how difficult that decision is for the jury members involved. Again, that could be another reason why we're seeing them deliberate so long, even after they were hung back a few days ago. What you're looking at live on the right corner of your screen is it looks like the seal of Michigan, but that is actually a live picture into the 17th Circuit Court. When we're not in session, this is what we've been seeing.
Yeah, it has. And it's actually been funny because there's been a couple times where people have actually walked past the camera and we thought that something was happening. We're like, oh my goodness. But obviously we will get word hopefully when the decision is made. And this obviously is zoomed all the way in because they don't want to show anything that shouldn't be seen, especially the jurors. Once the jurors come back in, they want to be able to keep their identity hidden. So this is zoomed all the way in so that way if someone happens to walk by and is tall enough to walk by, we really only saw the top of people's heads, but if someone is tall enough to walk by, we won't see who that person is. Yeah,
so this seal, again, just to give you a little bit of a peek behind the curtain into our process here on 13 on Your Side, you're looking at a pool camera, and any time that we're not in session, this is what we see in we have like a grid of all of our camera feeds, and we can see this grid, see that in the grid there, and just to kind of walk you through what the process is, this is how we know court is technically not in session as the jury continues deliberating. About 14 minutes into today's deliberations. So yeah, it's the fourth fourth day of deliberations, and of course, inside the courtroom, that's been going on. Outside the courtroom, a little bit of a different story where things have gotten contentious at some point with demonstrators. Yesterday, the heat kind of tamped down a little bit with the demonstrators for both Christopher Schurr and Patrick Leoya on different sides of the block that the circuit court building sits on.
Yeah, but people clearly having a lot of opinions about how this trial should go. We're going to take a listen to what people are saying on the street.
Why are you here today?
I'm here to support Patrick.
So you're only 11 and you decided to come out and demonstrate for such a, I guess, intense cause. There's a lot of people out here today. Why did you want to come out here too?
Because that was wrong for the officer. Now imagine if that was your family member, you would be sad.
So I know there's obviously a lot of things we can talk about in this case, right? But I guess you, as a young person, being here amongst a lot of people who are a lot older than you, how does that make you feel to join this?
That makes me feel proud.
It makes you feel proud. Can you tell me why that makes you feel proud?
Because I'm young doing it, so that means when I get older, I'm most likely going to do it and support our community.
And your aunt mentioned that you want to be a lawyer, right? Could you tell me why?
Because my teachers always said that I like to debate a lot, and I did a debate team in my class, and we won. So I just was thinking maybe I could be a lawyer when I grow older.
Do situations like this, would you like to be a lawyer because of stuff like this?
Yes.
Could you kind of explain that to me?
Yeah. I don't get it because he was on the floor. If he was on the floor, there was no reason to pull the trigger.
So you've seen the video?
Yes.
I guess kind of tell me a little bit about too, being out here with people who have all seen the same video. I know sometimes some people might get into debates. Have you witnessed that?
Not yet.
No, not yet. I guess I'm curious, for people who may have a different opinion than you, what would you wish they would see in that video?
Just imagine if that was your family member. You heart-stroking.
I am here to support the police in the entire country. I'm a retired GRPD employee after a long career, and to see the men and women that I know pour their heart and soul into protecting our community and being Monday morning quarterbacked on their decisions, and hearing some of the testimony in court or the way that things are presented, which are inaccurate, and again, just making quick judgments without training and such.
Sorry, we had cars right by. What were you in the police? Were you a police officer?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm a retired
Okay.
Grand Rapids Police Department.
So, being once on the force yourself, I guess kind of what goes through your mind when you see that footage from that day in April?
An officer making a split-second decision that all of us have been required to make, and it's one that you never want to make in your career, but you have to. And looking at that video, he had to make a decision, and I believe that he was in fear of death.
I'm curious, a lot of people have talked about being here because their family has been impacted, whether that's blood family or just their family of their profession. I guess, is that kind of another reason of why you're here today?
Yeah, I'm here for, our future. I'm here for my family and a society that has to have some form of law and ordinance, and you want boundaries in society. If people all of a sudden decide that I don't have to do what a law enforcement officer says, then good luck with our future society. And that's scary. And I'm scared for my kids as they grow up. If we truly think that officers are bad people and expect them to be perfect in all of their decision making, but allow others to not follow the law or do whatever they want.
Is this the first day you've been here, or have you been here before demonstrating?
This is my first day being here. However, I've been watching every minute of it. Yes.
I'm curious, so you've been watching, but today you decide to come out. Is there a specific reason for that?
Yeah, some of it's personal because I watch the prosecutor's arguments and I have taken warrants to the Kent County Prosecutor's office and obtained warrants for people for their arrest. And I find it interesting that you can argue one thing in court, but then issue warrants on other cases exactly what the opposite thing that you're arguing. So, like, for example, a foot chase. I worked for the police department for 29 years. We've done foot chases for 29 years. Never once have I been questioned by the Kent County Prosecutor's office if I should have been able to do a foot chase. And so I find it very interesting that now in court, all of a sudden that would be an issue.
I'm curious, going forward after this trial, do you have any hopes for the future of the police department?
I hope that you have people that want to be police officers.
Is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we wrap up the interview?
No, just my heart goes out to everybody involved in this case. It's not a cop thing and a anti-Patrick thing. I mean, nothing. I have nothing but love for everybody involved, and I am very sorry that they lost somebody in their life. But I also see how much the Schurr family is also losing, and we challenge. I mean, our men and women go out there because they are good people that want to serve our community, and I take it very. It's very upsetting to me after giving my heart and soul to this career, and my family. You make me cry. My family has suffered over my career not being home and being gone and being Monday morning quarterbacked on things that I've done throughout my career, and I just worry you're going to have people that don't want to be police officers.
And now we're joined with Deja Barrett and Aaron Sullivan out there looking at demonstrators, kind of getting a vibe of what's happening right now. Thank you for joining us, ladies.
Lauren, Tanner, thank you for having us this morning. So, of course, we're here outside the Kent County Courthouse. And, Aaron, I have to say the scene a little different than what you've experienced yesterday and earlier this week, where there's about a little over a dozen supporters for Schurr and a little less than a handful for Patrick Leoya. And typically here on the scene outside of the Kent County Courthouse, one side would be Leoya supporters and the other side Schurr. Here this morning, we're seeing intermingle of both of the groups this morning, with one being extremely vocal starting this morning. And so this is a scene not really active, not really a loud scene right now, definitely different from what you saw yesterday.
Right, and it really depends each morning we're out here. Sometimes some people will be towards the intersection of Lyon and Ottawa, and others will be towards this other entrance of the Kent County Courthouse. But like Deja said today, they are sitting together, just discussing their opinions. I will say one thing I did notice that was different from today is that Leoya supporters left messages for Schurr supporters here at the scene, typically because there's a lot of Schurr supporters here pretty early in the morning, and Leoya supporters kind of tend to come in around 10, kind of right before things start getting a little bit more active. So we are going to step out of the way here so you can just get a better look at what we're dealing with right now. And we've had a lot of viewers ask, well, why are we live out here? Why are we showing you guys who is out here demonstrating outside of the Kent County Courthouse? Well, it's because we want you to be aware of what's going on in your communities. We want you to know who is here, who is demonstrating, who is supporting each side, and also they want us to be here as well. We've talked to a lot of members from both sides saying that they're happy that people are here and actually giving light to whatever side that they want to speak about with us on camera. But I will say, like Deja said, it's not violent, it's not a riot. And that's another comment we've been getting, calling these riots. They're not riots. These are people practicing their First Amendment right out here demonstrating for what they believe in, whether that's in support of Patrick Leoya or ex-Grand Rapids police officer Christopher Schurr. And Deja, I know you've been here a little bit earlier than I have. What has really stuck out to you this morning?
Well, like you said, really quiet this morning. A quiet start to the morning. Of course, we're jury just got in to deliberate 8:30, and of course we're going into 2.5 days of deliberation. Well, Monday it was a half day where jury started deliberating, a full day Tuesday, Wednesday, and now we're here Thursday for a day of deliberation. A lot of folks again started trickling in a little before 7:30, 8 o'clock this morning. morning. And again, like you said, other supporters will come later this morning, but not a whole lot to see, not a whole lot of activity. But as you see in the videos, a lot of the supporters holding the blue flags, and of course, just, making their voices heard in their opinions and their stance in this case. And of course, just as we're waiting to hear from what's going to happen in court, as far as the verdict, they too are out here just waiting and paroling here outside of the Kent County Courthouse. So again, just a little over a dozen supporters for Christopher Schurr, a little less than a handful of supporters for Patrick Leoya. But again, the demonstrators are out here making their voices heard as we await a verdict.
Right, and Deja, I will say one thing that I've noticed that's a lot different than previous days we've been here at the scene in the morning is that a lot of supporters for Schurr kind of flooded this sidewalk because Christopher Schurr did walk in before trial every morning, and those supporters would give him a round of applause. We did notice that typically consisted of Grand Rapids police officers who were either off duty or those who were on duty wearing their uniform, even some police officers driving by honking their horns. But as you can see, since Christopher Schurr isn't here today, I mean, we still have another hour or so, but based on what we're seeing, those supporters are not here, basically giving us the signal that he will not be here today as the jury does decide his verdict.
Yeah, and again, of course, it's just the waiting scene on what we can expect on today. Again, a half day of deliberations for jury members on Monday, full day Tuesday, and Tuesday, Wednesday. Of course, we're here Thursday. A few folks here still lining outside the Kent County Courthouse as we all await a verdict or some live update of what's going on inside. As we've been covering, Judge Christina Mims, sending the jury back for deliberations after being deadlocked on Tuesday. And again, we don't know what the case will be for today. And as we continue to wait, demonstrators out here waiting as well to see, what will be of the day. And of course, we're keeping you, the folks at home, live on any updates. Of course, that verdict online, on air, and on 13 Plus. And again, we'll all be out here. We have our reporters inside the courtroom as well as outside the courtroom that's giving us live updates. Tanner?
Just want to ask a question. Aaron, at the top of this report, you said that you had seen some messages left over from Leoya supporters there for some of the folks of Christopher Schurr, as you were kind of mentioning the timing that they've all been showing up. I don't know if you can share any of them. How are they sending those messages to the Schurr supporters, and also what do some of those say? I know you were talking about the productive discussions happening today.
Right, I don't believe I clarified where those messages were written, but they're chalk messages written on the sidewalk, and a lot of them are saying, how can we feel protected if we're scared? That's what we're standing above right now. Others are calling out people by name, so it would be nice if we didn't show that. I mean, we absolutely can show that, but I know a lot of people are afraid of doxing going on in these situations. But take a look over here. All of these messages were written for Schurr supporters arriving this morning by those in support of Leoya. Some over here say no justice, no peace. This one says justice for Patrick. So a lot of them just saying, there's some that are explicit, so I would be careful, Doug, what you show. But a lot of them just in support of Leoya, a lot calling out the Grand Rapids Police Department. Like I said, chalk messages for everyone arriving this morning. So that, Tanner, to answer your question, that's what we're seeing here.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much for showing us that, and great reports out there for you guys. We'll check in with you guys here in our 9 o'clock hour.
And those who are watching, just a reminder, we do have security for our team at all time, and we will have them come away from the scene if it gets rowdy. We're going to conclude our current stream now, as jury deliberations are set to continue and can take hours, even days, as you've seen, to reach a verdict. When a verdict is reached, we will stream that live as it happens right here on 13 Plus. In the meantime, Morning Plus is coming up right now at 9 o'clock, and you can watch other trial-specific coverage by watching full days of testimony on demand, and a special On the Docket episode with Callie Lichter, which breaks down every moment that got us to this point. We'll see you shortly on Morning Plus. having with our technology here, but just for those who are joining us right now, that we have seen people get into the courtroom. We did see Christopher Schurr and his team walk in, and at one point walk into another room. We are looking at a monitor right now that shows Prosecutor Becker right there sitting at his seat. We have seen family members of Schurr. Not sure if, I'm sure Leoya's family is in there. We are not controlling this pool camera, so we can't see all the way, but we have seen people trickle into that courtroom.
Yeah, so just moments ago, before we joined you live on the air on WZZM, we did see Christopher Schurr enter the courtroom. This is a development from early this morning when we first got on our live stream on 13 Plus at 8:30, where we were told by our reporters on the ground that we had not seen Christopher Schurr come into the courthouse just yet. We do have confirmation as we actually just saw them go into the well of the court, and then there's a door. If we could take this live picture full, there's a door where those deputies are standing at. We saw him go into that door, and again, this is the first time all morning that we have seen this pool camera. Again, we don't have control over it, but this is the first time that we have seen this pool camera zoom out from the state seal, which is above the judge's chair on the left side of your screen, and out to the well of the court. A typical picture that we've seen for most of the trial. But again, we're still waiting on to hear about what exactly is going on. You can see some courthouse workers there working behind the desk. As you can kind of see, this kind of caught us off guard a little bit because we were not exactly sure if we were going to get a heads up whether there was going to be some activity with the jury this morning.
Yeah, and as you can see as well, Judge Mims has not gone into the courtroom just yet, but obviously the moment that she goes in, we believe that court proceedings, possible verdict, not verdict, will be read when she's able to come in and bring the jury in as well. So again, this is all developing right now.
Yeah.
We're not sure why people have been called into the courtroom this early in the morning. This is the first time in a long time we've seen them come this early into the courtroom on the day of deliberations.
It does, beg the question, what is going on here?
Yeah, it definitely does.
We are also talking back and forth with our producer. And of course, right now we want to let you know what exactly Christopher Schurr is charged with. So here are the things that we could see go down in court today. Again, there are 4 outcomes. And again, we don't know what the outcome is that we're getting ready to look at here live with you as we learn these developing details. But originally, Christopher Schurr was charged with second-degree murder in this case. That charge is described as a death caused by an act of the defendant, that's Schurr in this case, with malice. Another element of second-degree murder is that act causing the death is, quote, without justification or excuse, end quote. That element is part of what will be argued in this trial, or what has been argued in this trial, as the State of Michigan Court of Appeals believed there was enough evidence for a jury to determine if Schurr was justified to kill Leoya due to self-defense. And by the way, this is a felony punishable by up to life in prison. So that is just one element that the jury was considering, at the end of the testimony that we heard. We did see that the jury had another option to consider, which was that voluntary manslaughter charge. So there are a couple of different ways we could see this go down.
Yeah, so the jury in this case, like Tanner just said, is if they believe Schurr's action did not justify murder, they can deliver a guilty verdict for voluntary manslaughter. This was introduced before deliberations by Kent County Prosecutor Chris Becker. Voluntary manslaughter follows the definition of murder, but instead happens in the heat of passion with intent to cause harm, but without malice. This means Schurr would still have a form of a guilty in Patrick's killing. This is seen as a middle ground for jurors who may not be able to conclude murder is appropriate, but believe Schurr is not without guilt. So obviously, 4 things on the table right now. We could have a second-degree murder conviction, a voluntary manslaughter conviction. We could have no conviction. He found innocent and is acquitted. Also, we can still have that hung jury.
Yeah, another thing that we don't know at this point is we could either have those 4 outcomes, or the jury could come back, say we're deadlocked, and then we could see the judge say go back into deliberations. Again, the judge can go to that as much as they want to. They can send that jury back into their deliberation chambers to continue deliberations. We want to go live right now to Deja Barrett and Aaron Sullivan, our reporters live outside of the courthouse. So again, ladies, we have just now seen court start to fill up once again as we're waiting to see what's going on here. What has changed outside of the courthouse, if anything, at this point?
Well, Tanner, you all were talking about the activity inside. Not a whole lot again outside, other than the supporters here out. Usually, it's a lot more active scene out here in front of the Kenton County Courthouse. And behind us earlier, within the hour, we had over a dozen supporters for Christopher Schurr. They've since packed up. We're not sure exactly where they went, if they went inside the courthouse or they're maybe done for this morning. But we had over a dozen of Christopher Schurr supporters.
Right.
About a handful of supporters for Patrick Leoya still here, letting their voices be heard. Again, we've been out here this morning. Aaron, you were out here yesterday, a different scene, very active yesterday compared to today.
Right, and it's just a little bit past 9:40 in the morning now, so it's really surprising that Schurr supporters did pack up their flags, they packed up their signs, and they did leave. Another thing that we're shocked about is the fact that Christopher Schurr did not use the main entrance.
Right.
He has been every single day, maybe not yesterday because we didn't see him. He could have possibly been in there. We just didn't know. Based on our live feed inside the courthouse right now, we can see that he is in there.
Right.
Clearly didn't use the front entrance like they've been doing every single day. A lot of Grand Rapids police officers and supporters of Schurr lining up this sidewalk, giving him an applause, giving him cheers when he walks in every day. And that's been a huge part and a huge piece in the Schurr demonstrations to show him support. Now, in terms of what we're seeing outside of the courthouse right now, Schurr supporters did leave. There are a few Leoya supporters still here. But like I said, we're really surprised that that did happen.
Yeah, and again, not as active as we've seen. And of course, everyone's on watch right now.
Right.
Verdict watch. Of course, anything that's happening inside, we're all anticipating as demonstrators, as viewers, are waiting to hear what that verdict could be or whatever live update that we are awaiting for. Again, just a handful, a little less than a handful of supporters for Leoya out here this morning. Very quiet. But Aaron, you were talking about, like messages that supporters have left, and of course given some of the context and words and slogans and phrases out here, we don't want to show that, but just talk a little bit about what has been shared.
Well, typically we see supporters show up and picket with signs and do chants, but today there's chalk messages left on the ground. We're not going to show too many of them because they do have some words in there that we cannot air. But I do want to mention one thing, Deja, too. There's now a helicopter. Actually, that could be going to the hospital, so it just adds to the noise. Maybe that has nothing to do with this. But I will say there are now police officers stationed across the street a lot earlier than we typically see them. They're on their bikes over there. They did come in about 10 minutes ago. Typically, we see them arrive around noon every single day. And there are the sheriffs here out in front of the courthouse and other Grand Rapids police officers out in front of the courthouse. None here on the sidewalk, none here on the street, but they are all at Fifth Third Bank across the street right now. So that is something that's also a little different this morning that we're seeing.
Okay, and again, so just a little quieter this morning. Of course, we're all on verdict watch to see what will happen again. Of course, we've been talking about where we are in the case. Monday was a half day for jury deliberation, full day Tuesday, Wednesday, and now we're rolling into Thursday, just waiting to see what the jury will come up with, or whatever decision or whatever live updates that's going to happen inside the courtroom. Of course, we've heard from Callie. We have Riley inside giving us all of the updates, keeping the folks at home updated with what we have and what we're seeing here on the ground. But outside the Kenton County Courthouse right now, very quiet here on this sidewalk. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to toss back our producer saying that Schurr is inside.
All right, thank you very much, ladies. We appreciate your reporting outside the courthouse. It is 9:43 if you're just joining us. We're following developing news from inside the courtroom. Again, this is the first time we've seen movement in the courtroom for the better part of 3 days after the jury went back into deliberations, after they came out and said they were deadlocked. At this point, we just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, let's take this full so people can get a better look at what we're seeing right now. Obviously, we can see half of the room filled with Schurr supporters. We are assuming that Leoya supporters are on the other side. Schurr, for a moment, you see that door right there. Schurr and his team had stepped behind that door for a little bit, then stepped back in. We also obviously can see Kent County Sheriff's deputies all around in this courtroom. We saw police out in front. We see Kent County deputies here as well. We also have security for our team, for those who are wondering. Again, we are not sure exactly what is happening. We have not gotten word of we have reached a verdict or whether the jury is deadlocked once again. The judge also has not entered the courtroom at this point, which probably means that the jurors have not entered this room. So people are just patiently waiting, but there is a reason why they have been called back into this courtroom.
And that's exactly right, right? We're assuming that they've gotten a notification that something is going on here. Again, it could be one of the 4 outcomes you've heard us discuss not only on all of our newscasts, but also on our streaming platform ad nauseum over the last 7 or 8 days. But again, to your point, it really could mean that the jury's coming back to say we're deadlocked. We don't know what the situation is here. We were kind of on the fence this morning as to whether we were going to get a notification from court. You know, we had been reporting that it could be anywhere from a 30-minute to an hour delay on that verdict, right? But today we were a little unsure that we were even going to get a notice, as now we are seeing that court, it appears some activity, and it appears soon we should expect court to be called back into session.
And remember, the jury came back deadlock, I believe it was on Tuesday, and the judge did ask them to go back into deliberations. That's also a opportunity that could happen here. The judge could continue to say, you have not deliberated long enough, you need to continue deliberations. So a lot of things could happen at this point. Again, we're just waiting to kind of see what's happening. All the things that they have to take and consider, obviously, is that second-degree murder charge and also that voluntary manslaughter charge. We want to take a moment to show you the makeup of this jury before the verdict is reached. This jury is made up of 10 women and 4 men. The youngest is in her early 20s, while some are in their 50s and 70s. 10 members are white, 3 are Latino, and 1 member is black. And important to remember, both the defense and prosecution did approve this jury, so both sides going into this trial felt confident that this makeup of this jury would help them talk about listen to their case.
Yeah, and again, to your point, they did have to decide on those 14 people chosen. Again, the other day before deliberations started, we saw 2 of those jury members dismissed. Not necessarily dismissed, but again, they were asked, you know, to be alternates in the case. That means 12 would continue on, and if at any point one of those 12 jurors needed to leave this court proceeding for whatever reason, either those 2 would be swapped in as an alternate. That's why they do that, so everybody involved can listen in on what's being testified in court, and then if they need to, they'll swap. Again, that was seat 1 and 2. We don't know the jury makeup. Again, that's been intentionally done, so nobody knows the identity of who those jurors are. Again, as we wait for this jury, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens here. There are 4 main outcomes that we could see. Again, he could be convicted of second-degree murder here. He could also be convicted of voluntary manslaughter. There could also be a hung jury, and there could also be sent back into deliberations. I understand that we have Callie Lichter live in the courthouse right now following this breaking news for us. Callie, I know we were texting back and forth a few minutes ago. Any indication on what is going on?
No, Tanner, we really do not know what is going on in that courtroom right now. I know we're standing outside of the media room, so I can't see the feed right now of what's going on inside the courtroom. But, you know, there's definitely a different energy up there today. I know our Riley Mack, who's currently in the courtroom, said, you know, today just feels different. And when she told us, she'd sent us a text, she said, guys, we're going into the courtroom. And again, we don't know what that means. We've already seen people called back for when the jury told Judge Christina Mims, you know, they were deadlocked. So like you guys have been saying, you know, for the past couple of minutes, this could mean a deadlocked jury, or this could mean a verdict. This could mean they, you know, they came to a conclusion about, you know, what type of verdict, you know, they want to, they agreed on. And then, you know, what I was seeing from that court feed, you saw the defense team along with Christopher Schurr, you know, kind of go into a separate room for a few minutes. Again, we do not know what they were talking about back there. It's really all just up in the air and a waiting game to see, you know, what's going to happen. And I would assume, you know, the coming minutes when the judge comes back and the jury comes back in. And I mean, you know, it's been 4 days of deliberation, and the jury does not have a set time on how long they can deliberate on. You know, it's kind of up to them. It's almost like, you know, go at your own pace. It's really until they can come to a conclusion that they can really deliberate on this case. And so maybe they said 4 days is enough time to come to a verdict, or again, maybe we could see another deadlocked jury.
And obviously, Callie, you are not in the courtroom right now. You're on a separate level from the courtroom. But I have to ask, is there any tension in the courthouse at this point? You know, me and Taylor were talking casually before we were alerted that people were in the courtroom. How is the vibe inside the actual courthouse right now?
Yeah, so being on the 5th floor with the courtroom being on the 10th floor, we aren't seeing a lot of people who are here for the trial for the case. Really, the people that the media here on the 5th floor have been seeing for the past couple days have just been the media, unless they've gone upstairs to the 10th floor. But from the messages we're getting from Riley Mack, who's been on the 10th floor for the past couple of days, going to that courtroom, she said everyone is just waiting. She said there's been more people here than she's seen in previous days, waiting to get into that courtroom, anticipating a verdict. And so, from what she is saying up there, it's just a different type of energy today that we've seen. And, as you come inside the courthouse, you have to go through security, put your things through security. And I know that, talking to people down there has also been the same thing. Everyone is just awaiting this verdict, hoping that it's going to come on the 4th day today.
It does seem like there is a different energy, Callie, to your point. And of course, there are those 4 main things that we could see in the outcome of this. Again, that second-degree murder, voluntary manslaughter, acquittal, or a hung jury here, in which case there would be a mistrial. Can you kind of explain what the energy has been like around court over the last 4 days as the jury has been deliberating? Of course, right now is a completely different energy, but over the last 4 days, it's really been kind of a waiting game.
Yeah, that it has. And I know no one was quite anticipating from, people who have been telling us what they kind of expect, how long for this is going to take. I know we were originally told 3 weeks, I believe the first week was jury selection, last week and this week. But, we're told that was kind of like a longer estimate. But so, we were knowing probably on the first day of deliberation, we were not going to get a verdict, maybe not on the second day either. But as the days kind of tick on, a lot of people are saying, there's a lot to get through. So, it's definitely over the past couple of days, it's just been sitting in wait, not really expecting anything. But now, that everyone's getting called in for a second time, that's definitely changed. It's like, okay, maybe this is go time. Maybe we're going to get some answers, some conclusions here coming shortly.
And we have gotten word that one of the clerks for the courtroom, the judge is in. Now let's go straight to the courtroom right now.
Court for the County of Kent is now in session. Honorable Christina Mims presiding.
Thank you. You may be seated. And we're going back on the record in 2210260 FC, People versus Schurr. All parties are present. And I did receive communication from the jury that they're unable to reach a decision. I am going to have them come in to the courtroom to verify that, and we'll proceed from there. Anything you want to address on the record before that happens, Mr. Becker?
Nothing from Your Honor.
Mr. Borgula?
Yes, briefly, Your Honor. Just following up on some communications we had with the court regarding, I understand the court's going to declare a mistrial. I asked the court if it would consider the Michigan Court Rule 6.420 that relates to if the defendant is charged with 2 or more counts. The court may inquire the jury as whether they reach unanimity as to one of them. And it's my understanding that the court is not inclined to do that for the reasons discussed, which were that, first of all, it's discretionary. Second of all, it's the court's position this isn't actually 2 separate counts. It's just 1 count with a lesser included.
Right. Mr. Becker?
Yeah, I've taken verdicts like that where there's 2 separate counts, but this is 1 count with a lesser included, so it makes a difference. So I don't think I can do that.
Yeah, so that rule does not apply in this situation because there's only 1 count on the information, so.
All right.
All right, welcome back. You may be seated. And I did receive communication that you were unable to reach a verdict. Who was the 4-person? Raise your hand. Okay. And so first I wanted to verify that that's true, that you're unable to reach a verdict as a panel.
Correct.
Okay. And so what I'm going to do is declare a mistrial in this case, and that means that you're all discharged. And so I'm going to send you back to the jury room just to await further instructions regarding transportation and that sort of thing. Also, I will come back and speak with you to answer any questions I can answer, and then potentially the attorneys may want to speak with you as well, but that would be up to you. And I'll be back in a few minutes, so we'll have you leave out of the same door. Thank you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. You may be seated.
All right. I'm not sure there's anything else we need to address at this point.
Nothing for Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Brooklyn.
Not from the defense, thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Court is adjourned.
All rise, please. Thank you. You may be seated.
Breaking news update here in Grand Rapids. The judge has declared a mistrial in the trial of Christopher Schurr. This coming after the jury once again not being able to come to a unanimous vote on what happened. You can see people now leaving the courtroom. This is breaking news. We just found this out. Very shocking to see that the jury was not able to come to an agreement on what a possible conviction could have been here.
Yeah, before the jury announced exactly kind of what was going on here, there were a couple motions before the jury entered into the courtroom. Again, the defense team standing up and citing a Supreme Court rule that was 6.420, the judge ultimately saying that this rule in this case did not apply. And we're going to get some more clarification on that as we continue to move through this breaking news process. Again, so after that whole ordeal went down between the defense team and the judge, right after that, the jury entered, and then the judge confirmed with the jury foreperson that a mistrial had been, or that they were not able to reach a decision. And of course, that is when the judge basically said that they were going to be declaring a mistrial. Not much else happened after that, as far as we could see, but this is a live look outside of the courthouse, or excuse me, the courtroom there on the 10th floor of the Kent County Courthouse. And you can see immediately we saw a lot of people coming out of there. And of course, as this breaking news transpires, we're going to learn in the days and weeks that come what this will mean for this case going forward.
We quickly saw Ven Johnson, who is the attorney representing Patrick Leoya's family, walk out of the courtroom. Still waiting to see who else will be able to walk out. Hopefully we'll be able to talk to someone. I don't know if you just saw, but 13 on your sides, Riley Mack and Josh Albertus were outside Riley was inside the courtroom. Josh was outside of the courtroom getting ready to hopefully speak to someone. In reaction to this, we can see our cameras actually moving, hoping to see where they're able to go. But again, a lot of things could happen after this. For people who are watching, we've been talking about a mistrial was one of the options that could have been an option for this trial and how it would end. And this doesn't mean that this case is necessarily over. Prosecutor Becker could ask for a retrial, and this whole trial could happen all over once again. He could also offer plea agreements to a lesser charge, and Christopher Schurr could agree to those agreements, and then that case be over. But, you know, and also the judge still has to assign a date. If Prosecutor Becker would want a new trial, she has to assign a date. Sometimes we see that happen right after she declares a mistrial. Let's bring in Callie Lichter. Callie, this is breaking news. Kind of tell us, walk us through what just happened.
Yeah, so you know, this has definitely been something that we've been anticipating over the past couple of days, Lauren, but I don't know if really any of us were expecting at, you know, around 9:30, 10 in the morning, whatever time we're currently at, that we were going to, you know, get this, mistrial ruling from the judge. And, we kind of anticipated, they were deadlocked a couple of days ago. They went back into deliberation. But, talking to one of our legal experts, Andrew Rodenhouse, he was saying that he's been on trials before where they have deliberated for a week before they come back with a verdict. So, I think a lot of us were staying optimistic that we were going to get a verdict, that it wasn't going to be ruled a mistrial, but that's exactly what happened. You had, the judge come back in, the jury come in, and the judge goes, I believe you guys are deadlocked. He sent me a note, and, that was confirmed that the jury was deadlocked, and, there was no really fanfare, explosions, anything. She just goes, okay, I'm gonna call a mistrial. Everyone, you're dismissed. I think, they're taking the jury back into another room, just for some, probably post-trial things that they have to do. But yeah, that was pretty much it. She said it was a mistrial, and that's over. And something that, we've been saying is there are options. It's not like, this case is potentially over. There could be a retrial, there could be a proposed plea deal, or, Kent County Prosecutor Chris Becker could just choose not to, touch the case again, bring it back up for, that retrial, that plea deal, and, let Christopher Schurr go. And so it's really, what are we going to see in the coming days of, what's going to be the repercussions of this mistrial on this case? We really do not know. And again, when it comes to court cases, when it comes to, certain things, you can't really predict what's going to happen, especially on a trial, on a case like this, that really had a lot of unknowns up until the trial. And now again, we're just kind of back in this limbo pattern. What's going to happen over the next coming days?
Yeah, very similar to what we've been experiencing in limbo over the last 4 days, waiting for the jury to deliberate in this case. Callie, again, as you're joining us, it's just after 10. And if you're just joining us on the air, we want to let you know that the jury was not able to reach a decision here. The judge declaring a mistrial in this case. To Callie's point, really no telling what could be happening over the next days or weeks to come. It doesn't mean that this case is necessarily over. We're just got to wait for the next step in this case.
And I think something important to mention is that we will be able to hear from Riley Mack more on reaction in the courtroom, but we were listening in. It was almost so silent that a pin could drop and you could hear it. There was really no reaction from either side that we could at least hear. Now, obviously, Riley will be joining us later on to maybe tell us if people dropped their heads or if people began crying. We don't know those details just yet, but we'll eventually get to that. We're also going to be monitoring what's happening outside of the courthouse. We saw the demonstrators outside kind of dwindle right before people were able to go back into the courtroom. Hopefully we'll be able to check in with our reporters outside the courthouse to see if people have picked up. We saw police starting to approach the area. I'm looking at some of the other coverage, and I am seeing people outside the courthouse right now. So definitely a lot of people reacting. Also, I want to take a peek on social media. We posted this breaking news just a moment ago on our Facebook page, and I am seeing people respond for both sides. Some people happy that this was a mistrial. Some people still upset, saying that there was supposed to be a guilty trial. So obviously people on both sides either happy or upset with this outcome.
Yeah, still checking some of the sources that I've got available to me here, but it was actually very calm how this entire procedure in this last half hour worked. We saw people kind of rush into the courthouse or into the courtroom and just sit and wait. And at that point, we're kind of like, okay, what's going to happen here? Because at this point, there are 4 outcomes right before the judge made her final ruling on this. And of course, the outcome ended up being a mistrial, but that was when the jury indicated to the judge, and this is that process that we've been telling you, that the jury is able to send communications to the judge if they need more clarification on instructions or what have you here. And again, this communication was if they had reached a verdict or not, and they had indicated that they just could not come to a decision. So at that point, as soon as the judge got that notification, the jury was filed into the room, and before they came into the room, if you've missed it, there was a quick comment from the defense side, basically citing a Supreme Court ruling there, trying to figure out a mistrial situation. And again, it was a Supreme Court ruling which the judge denied in that case. But at this point, the jury comes back into the room. The jury foreperson says, we cannot decide, and the judge at that point makes her ruling as a mistrial. So again, this all happened very, very fast. As soon as the judge walked in, I would say maybe it happened in like 3 to 4 minutes before the judge made that final ruling of a mistrial. And again, we are kind of just waiting and seeing what happened there. Again, we're working to get Riley Mack, who is live in the courtroom, kind of monitoring things there. We're also working to learn what the conditions are outside as well. We know that as soon as the jury was called back in and the courthouse started to pick back up with activity, we do know that the supporters for Christopher Schurr kind of cleared out. No word on if they knew exactly what was going to be happening, but they did kind of clear out. A handful of Patrick Leoya family supporters were still out there as well. So again, on this breaking news, we have a mistrial in the Christopher Schurr trial. Joining us live right now is Deja Barrett and Aaron Sullivan, live outside of the Kent County Courthouse. What is the scene there as we now get this breaking news, ladies?
Good morning. Deja and I were just saying we are absolutely shocked to see all of the Schurr supporters leaving this morning. So we haven't talked to any of them, but we have been here talking with Leoya supporters, them expressing their concerns about this verdict and this mistrial that was called. A lot of them not wanting to go on camera with us, but we did talk to one gentleman who says he's praying that in the future the people of Grand Rapids can agree on a future decision.
Yeah, again, surprised that those supporters, about a dozen, more than a dozen, were here earlier this morning. And then, you know, the flux of them have since left. Again, not a whole lot of reaction to what we just heard, the breaking news of the mistrial. Not a whole lot of actions out here. A few have expressed their their views and how they're feeling about this. And of course, as the those that are inside come outside, we're waiting to get reactions from those folks, but not a whole lot going on outside the Kenton County Courthouse. Rather quiet, for this news to be just released.
Right, and the few Leoya supporters that are still here, they are vocal, they are talking to media, but they're especially talking to the police that are stationed across the street at Fifth Third Bank. So I'm sure the police here in Grand Rapids do expect more demonstrators to be here later today. But as of right now, there's probably around 10 people here with their Black Lives Matter signs, with their flags, their Justice for Patrick signs that will probably, we assume, will be here later today as well.
Yeah, and of course we'll keep you updated here outside the courthouse while a lot is going on inside.
Right.
Those folks coming outside, sharing their reactions, those still driving by, blowing, just getting the breaking news. So of course we'll keep you updated on air, online, and on 13 Plus from the latest outside the Kent County Courthouse.
And ladies, I have to ask, what was the reaction when people outside heard that this was a mistrial? Were there anyone out there that showed any emotion to hearing the decision in this case?
They seem disappointed, very disappointed from the Leoya supporters here. They're sitting right now just kind of embracing each other. Obviously very emotional. They've been out here for a week now, demonstrating, singing, praying. So obviously to hear this isn't what they were hoping for. Wish we could have more people to talk to about what people are saying, but this is the only thing we're seeing right now is that it's calm, but people are upset.
Yeah, I had a gentleman, didn't speak with him directly, but come out very vocal, saying, using some profanity and then exclaiming that just 2 days and the judge has declared a mistrial. So I think a lot of folks were expecting Judge Mims to say, hey, go back and deliberate some more to see if we can come to some type of decision today. So that gentleman was very vocal coming outside. But other than that, not a whole lot going on or being expressed right now, which is actually surprising, as we've seen earlier this week. Supporters on each side of the sidewalk here outside, and if you're looking here, folks consoling each other, rather quiet, quiet set right here where usually it's very, vocal and expressive, but not a whole lot to hear right now out here.
And Deja, I know our crews inside will also be trying to find out more answers as to why this verdict came just 2.5 days after it started. I think a lot of people out here are really shocked at how quickly this came about. So definitely questions we're going to be asking today.
All right, Laura.
Yeah, lots of just emotions, I'm sure, for those folks sitting on the sidewalk, as we were just seeing there, Patrick Leoya supporters. After finding out the news, we're just hearing from Aaron and Deja that they were consoling each other over this. You know, I'm sure that a lot of people have some interesting reactions as we learn this news of a mistrial. You know, I think both sides were kind of hoping for some sort of resolution one way or the other in this trial. Again, that's tough to say, but of course, you know, it does appear that people are having an emotional reaction to all of this, especially some of the people that have been sitting outside court day in and day out, you know, since this began last Monday. And of course, that is hard to believe that this trial has been going on for the better part of a week and a half, now ending with this mistrial result. And again, it's up in the air as to what the next steps in this case could be, whether the prosecutor asks for a retrial here, or if there is some sort of lesser plea agreement. These are all things that can be considered, but still no ending resolution, it feels, for both sides at this point.
And for people who are curious, just because the jury could not come to a decision doesn't mean that all of them were not on the same page.
Right.
It could have been just one person who just didn't want to budge on their opinion. It could have been two people. It could have been them split on between the two charges that Schurr could have been convicted of. It could have been really split between whether he was innocent or guilty. There are so many options as to what really was happening in that jury room. And there's a possibility we'll never know. These jurors do not have to talk to media about their decisions. So there is a possibility we will never know what happens. But again, some experts have said that they weren't surprised that this happened like this because just how difficult this whole entire case has been. We're now getting a chance to speak with Riley Mack. Riley was inside the courtroom when the judge did declare a mistrial. Riley, talk about that moment. What happened?
You guys, you could hear a pin drop in that courtroom. It was completely silent. From the moment I walked in nearly to the end, there was, just everyone was silent. There were some, shakes of the head after this came out. And, this is honestly a decision that no one is really happy with. It just feels like, I think the feeling in that courtroom is that, what was the point of all of this? It's been, 20-ish hours of jury deliberation, and no decision to come out of that. I was sitting there in the third row of the courtroom. I was sitting behind Patrick Leoya's family. They didn't say anything. It was just complete silence. There was some Schurr's family, Schurr's loved ones were praying right before, the judge spoke. And, this is a decision that nobody is really happy about in there. It was very obvious. Complete silence. No reaction, honestly. This is kind of what we, having the jury in deadlock, 10 hours ago, people thought that they could come to a decision after this, but we've sat with the jury now 20 hours of deliberation and they got nothing out of it. Now, honestly, the case just goes back to Kent County Prosecutor Chris Becker, and it's up to him whether this case is going to be retried, whether we go through this same thing over again. For now, no reaction from the courtroom.
Yeah, Riley, while we have you, and again, I want to be clear for our audience, we are waiting on a press conference here after we learned this result of a mistrial in the Christopher Schurr trial. But you have been covering this inside the courtroom day in and day out since day number one on our live blog. I'm curious, what has that been like? And then to see all of the testimony that we have seen up until now to get this result. I mean, as somebody who's been in the courtroom every single day with those supporters on either side, is this a shock to you, or is this kind of something that you were anticipating the entire time? I mean, the testimony at some points did get very confusing.
Yeah. It did, absolutely. That's such a great question. I think it's not so much a surprise since we heard that the jury was in deadlock, 2 days ago. We heard that and we considered this as a possibility. I will say it is kind of an underwhelming ending to such a, we had a back and forth going during those testimonies. The cross-examination could get really contentious at points. And, this is a case that people really care about on both sides. People are up in arms about their side in this case. It honestly, like I said, just feels like an underwhelming end to such a case that caused so much strife in Grand Rapids. Being here since the beginning, it would have been nice to say that there was a conclusion to this trial, that there was a verdict that came out of this. But yeah, I think this goes to show that both of the attorneys put forward a really great case for their side if the jury could not come to a decision on that. And it's obvious that the jury, you know, really cared about this case, that they could go back and forth on these issues for 20 hours of deliberation, and in the end come up with nothing.
Yeah.
And Riley, what about when people were leaving the courtroom? We actually saw you leaving the courtroom as people were heading outside of the courtroom. Were people rushing out? Were the families trying to kind of gathering together? What was that, I guess, process after being able to leave that courtroom?
Absolutely. Some supporters of justice for Patrick Leoya were in the courtroom. They had a little bit of an outburst at the end. You know, one supporter, you know, said something about one of the jury members possibly being biased, and they were kind of, you know, there were 9 Kent County Sheriff deputies inside the courtroom, and one of them said, "Okay, it's time for you to go." So, you know, all of the Leoya supporters kind of left at once, along with the Leoya family. Christopher Schurr and his family stayed behind, though. We saw them leaving probably 5-10 minutes after that decision came out. We came in the courtroom at 9:30. We were called in for a possible decision. The judge said mistrial at 9:55, I believe. So in 25 minutes, this case of weeks and years, honestly, in preparation is just over just like that. Christopher Schurr's family left, you know, a few minutes after that. I believe they're gone from the courthouse completely. Everybody left pretty immediately after that.
Yeah, and again, I think you put it best, kind of an underwhelming end to the case after all of that testimony we heard, all of the exhibits admitted into evidence in this, and again, some of the not controversial, but contradictory testimonies we heard on both sides as both sides were trying to make their argument. It's no wonder that we had a jury that couldn't come to a decision here, because at the end of the day, no matter what your perceived bias as you are walking to the courtroom is, I think, you know, it would be not surprising to see this outcome.
Most definitely. We definitely want to hear from experts that we've been speaking to this whole entire trial. Joining us now is Andrew Rodenhouse, and I believe Tanya is in the corner. Andrew, I want to start with you. What is your initial reaction to hearing that this was a mistrial?
Well, I'm actually at the courthouse as we speak, and the buzz started about probably 40 minutes ago that something was going to go on. There was a lot of speculation around the courthouse, and then when we heard that it was a hung jury, I think everyone kind of felt that we were headed in that direction anyways. The interesting question is going to be how they're going to go forward.
Tanya, I'd love to hear from you as well. What is your reaction to hearing that this was a mistrial?
Well, I'll be perfectly honest. When they came back early on saying that they were hung, I was surprised that they spent the entire day deliberating. So, what I want to point out to the audience is the jury really listened to the judge's deadlocked jury instruction. She said to them, "Hey, it's okay to have a difference of opinion, go back, deliberate, consider each other's opinions." So, they spent the entire day yesterday deliberating. I suspect what happened is toward the end of the day, they probably had decided they were in fact hopelessly deadlocked, but probably decided to go home and sleep on it, come back in the morning and see if anyone's minds had changed. So in that respect, I'm not surprised that we got a note from the jury early on this morning that they were in fact deadlocked. So this played out consistently with my personal experience and hung juries in cases that I've tried. So in that respect, not surprised the way that this played out.
Tanya, I want to ask you, you know, what is the path forward for this case at this point? You know, there are a couple of different ways this could go down in the future, but at this point, for the audience that's watching at home, what are some of the things that they might be able to see moving forward on this case?
Right. So, as your reporters indicated, it now goes back to Chris Becker to decide what, if anything, he wants to do going forward. In our legal system, with respect to criminal cases, it's the prosecutor who has the sole charging decision. And so there's an old adage that we as trial lawyers have. There's the case you prepare, the case you try, and the case you wish you would have tried. So I suspect that both sides are going to reflect on what happened in this trial, what evidentiary hurdles they encountered and overcame. And that's the same for Mr. Becker. He's going to have to take a long, hard look at how this trial played out and decide what he wants to do going forward. There's a lot of time, effort, and money involved in this case, and not that money matters. I mean, that's not the prosecutor's concern, but from the general perspective, there's been a lot of resources poured into this case, and that all will reflect in how he decides what he wants to do going forward.
And Andrew, I'd love to hear your opinion on this decision in regards to the whole entire trial. Does essentially a hung jury leading to a mistrial show how difficult this trial was for jurors to debate on? Or I guess, what can you gather from the case going into the decision?
Well, what I would be really curious about, and this is what the both sides, now that the jury has been declared hung, the jurors are now free to talk to the parties and to anybody else that they want. And I would be interested to find out, like, what was the split? Was it pretty even, or was there one holdout one way or the other? And what were those people thinking? Because now they can talk to those jurors and find out. And I think that that would be part of the decision by Mr. Becker on whether or not he wants to try the case again.
So just for clarification, the prosecution and defense can talk to the jurors and hear what they said, or who can do that?
Anybody can ask the jurors. I mean, I would suggest not hounding them, but anybody can. The jurors are now free to talk to anybody they wish to about the case. They're no longer what we would consider legally as, quote, sequestered, and so they can talk to anybody. And so oftentimes we'll talk to jurors after the case is over. Sometimes I'll wait a few days and see if they're willing to talk to me and ask them questions about what they thought went well, what they thought they didn't go well, what was the deliberation like. And I would imagine that they'll probably get some space right now, but at some point in time down the road, someone's going to be asking them what their thoughts were. And I think that's going to play in part to what Mr. Becker's decision is going to be. I wouldn't expect him to make a decision immediately.
As we have you two here with us live on the air, we want to make sure that you both know, and of course our audience at home, that we are waiting on a press conference as we get this mistrial ruling here in the Christopher Schurr trial. I'm curious to both of you, to your question there, you know, after this trial, the people involved, so the prosecution and defense, they're allowed to ask the jury questions. As you said, they're allowed to talk to people about this case. I'm curious, what questions, or what, if you were in the position that Prosecutor Becker is in, and of course the defense side, what questions would you both be asking those jurors?
Well, I would just want to know, like, what happened in deliberations. Who was thinking what, how impactful was certain testimony. You know, I would ask them what they thought of specific witnesses. What did you think about the presentation? It's a fact-finding mission, and so you ask a lot of open-ended questions, and you have to go into it with no preconceived notion on what you think happened. You want to ask them what they thought happened, because you don't want to. First of all, you want to find out actually what was going through their minds, because if you're going to try the case again, probably jurors in the future are going to have those similar notions.
And Tanya, we'd love to hear from you as well. What would you be asking after this?
Yeah, I would ask exactly what Andrew just suggested, but then I would narrow in a little bit more and say, what specific issues did it come down to that you could not agree on? So yes, I want the big picture, like what did they think of certain witnesses? What did they think of the experts on both sides? But at the end of the day, as we've talked through this entire case, really the issue in this case all along has been a single issue. Was Christopher Schurr justified in shooting Patrick Leoya? And so there had to be a fact or some facts that they specifically talked about and couldn't agree upon. And that would be really important going forward if this case is retried, because it would give the parties the opportunity to address that the next time the case is tried.
Something that the jury was allowed to consider after the testimony was done with is that voluntary manslaughter charge. Do you think that might have confused jurors at all? And maybe that's where we ended up. I know I'm asking you to speculate on that, but do you think that might have confused jurors when they attacked that on as something that they could consider?
I certainly think it could have. And if they do, in fact, interview the jurors and the jurors are willing to speak, it would be interesting to hear the jurors' answers on that. Sitting back on this and looking in, I certainly think when there had been no mention of manslaughter until the very end of the case and it gets thrown in there, and then the elements, depending on how the judge read the instructions to the juror, are very similar to second-degree murder, I think it could have confused them.
Andrew, I want to bring you back in. You were talking about it could take a couple days before Prosecutor Becker does decide to ask the juror questions. Can you give us anything in regards to a timeline if he does decide on a trial? You know, we waited 3 years for this trial. Should people now sit and wait another? Can they expect to wait another 3 years? Could it happen in a year? Kind of what is your experience with a trial being retried again?
Well, I can tell you this, is that it depends on the judge's docket. The judge could potentially have trials already scheduled. And then the judge would have to decide whether or not she wants to move a trial in order to try this one again. And so that's where the judge is going to have a lot of discretion in how she wants to proceed going forward. I've had judges say, well, declare a mistrial and say, we'll see you back here Monday morning, and we start over. And I've had judges say, look, my docket's not clear for another 9 months, and then it gets scheduled for then. And so, and in the meantime, there could potentially be interlocutory appeals, appealing some of the issues they had at the original trial in order to resolve them ahead of the next trial. And so that's a huge question, and I'm telling you, I'm going to give you the Professor Tanya Kraus-Phelan legal answer. It depends.
I'm sorry, and I have another question in regards to a trial or a plea agreement. Is it one or the other, or can both happen? Can Becker propose a plea agreement and the defense say, no, I don't want to do that, and then he say, okay, we'll go to a trial? Or how does that even work?
That is an absolute possibility. It depends on what the jury's thoughts were. And what the jury split was, that the prosecutor could propose a resolution that the parties could just agree to. The prosecutor's office is gonna need to, and I know Mr. Becker will do this. I mean, this is how the Kent County Prosecutor's Office works, is they will be in consultation with Mr. Leola's family and ask them, what are your thoughts on this? Is this something that we want to try to resolve with a plea agreement, or are you guys? And so he'll definitely consult with them before making any decision.
All right. Well, we'll ask you two to stand by because we have a reporter that is outside the courthouse getting ready to join us live here. I want to mention we're waiting for a press conference inside the courthouse. We're also waiting now, I'm looking at my email, a press conference from
I've got to check my court status because I'm waiting in court.
Okay. If you got to go, we'll let you go, but we understand.
So let me do this. Let me check and see where they're at. And if I have to log off, it won't take very long. It won't take very long for me to be done.
Okay.
So just hang tight.
All right. Another press conference we're waiting on is, of course, the attorneys Ben Johnson and Ben Crump are also expecting to hold a virtual press conference as well. Joining us live outside of the Kent County Courthouse is Deja Barrett and Aaron Sullivan, who have been covering the reaction of both sides outside. When we checked in with you last, it seemed like people on the Patrick Leoya side of this were disappointed in the outcome that we learned about an hour ago.
Yeah, that's right, Tanner. And those supporters, still just about a handful you see right here behind us, still here. Many saying they're disappointed, consoling each other, rather. Right. I spoke with a young lady who came out and said that it just was plainly unfair. Of course, like you mentioned, disappointed at the result of this being a mistrial. And then she's asking, well, what happens next? And of course, you all have been covering these options and what's going to be next, but not a whole lot of noise being made here outside the Kenton County Courthouse. Actually, not seeing any of Christopher Schurr's supporters out here. They were here earlier this morning, about over a dozen of them, but right now not any actually out here outside the Kenton County Courthouse.
No, we did have one woman here who wanted to support Schurr, asking where did everyone go. We didn't have answers for her, but I know, Deja, you mentioned the Leoya supporters just just disappointed. And I did talk to one gentleman earlier who said he just hopes in the next few years that the people of Grand Rapids can agree and come to a decision. And he just prays and is hoping for peace. And he told me Black Lives Matter, and he's going to be here today saying that and showing his support for the Leoya family.
Yeah, Aaron, and I think we do have that sound from earlier today. Let's hear it.
It's 2 lives that's going to be lost here. You know, it's just not the guy that lost his life and the police that is being judged right now. You know, it's sad, you know, for both sides. But, you know, there's a thin line. And like I said, when do the chase stops? And far as the judges and them coming to a decision, everybody has an opinion. And their decision, we have to accept that because we are the people.
Yeah, we just had one gentleman walking past just, saying his frustration, about police, about the jury. So clearly he's really frustrated, but it seems like he's leaving. But like Deja said earlier, the scene is very quiet here. We do have crews on the other side of the courthouse that I do believe they did see Schurr exit the building already. So it's pretty calm here right now, Deja.
Yeah, and of course, as we saw in the feed inside, a lot of people exited the courtroom, but we haven't seen a whole lot of commotion of folks coming outside of the courthouse. Again, a quiet scene here outside the Kent County Courthouse. Of course, just hearing the news of this mistrial. Not a whole lot of reaction, but Leoya supporters holding Black Lives Matter signs are still here. Many sitting on the bench, kind of just reading, gathering their thoughts and just sitting to see what's next. And of course, as the morning continues to unfold and as we learn more about what's next, we'll keep you updated with the reactions here outside the Kent County Courthouse.
Deja, I will say one more thing. We did notice some employees who we presume work at the courthouse. They are leaving for the day. I did ask one gentleman inside with security if a lot of employees were going to be leaving. He said most likely. They do suspect that there will be more activity out here later, but of course, Grand Rapids Police across the street underneath Fifth Third Bank Pavilion. So we're definitely going to keep our eyes on this and give you guys live looks at what we're experiencing right outside the courthouse.
Yeah, again, not a whole lot of activity, not a whole lot of noise, but this is what we're seeing out here, Tanner, Lauren.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That's Aaron Sullivan and Deja Barrett reporting live for us outside of the Kent County Courthouse. We want to go now live to a picture of the backside of the courthouse where we understand that there is police protecting a van. Not sure who is in the van or why we're seeing this van, but again, this seems to be another area of focus for some of the deputies and police officers that we have been seeing protect folks go in and out of the courthouse all week and last week as well. And again, this is just one of the things that we know now to be true is that we're seeing that van. But of course, we heard that report that Christopher Schurr may have already left the courthouse. But at this point, if he might be in that van, that could be a possibility at this point.
And we're also kind of getting some more details. Every day, for the most part, we've seen him walk in front of the courthouse with support. Yesterday, we did not see that happen. Also, again, today. So there's a possibility that his events could have been preparing him, saying this could be the day, and maybe to lessen the tension around this this verdict, having him go in the back of the courthouse instead of the front of the courthouse.
If you are just joining us at 10:32 this morning, we are live on the air bringing you breaking news that it has been a mistrial declared in the trial of Christopher Schurr. Of course, we're doing this coverage on the air and of course on 13 Plus. This is really what we've been hearing, an underwhelming end. I won't call it a resolution, but an end to the trial, but a resolution to this. And of course, we are hearing from the judge. Let's go ahead and listen into what happened about an hour ago.
I wanted to verify that that's true, that you're unable to reach a verdict as a panel?
Correct.
Okay. And so what I'm going to do is declare a mistrial in this case.
Very quick things happened. She called everyone in. There was a brief moment where the defense was asking for a ruling on a certain Supreme Court rule. And of course, she had denied that ruling. And then the judge or the jury came back in and said, we can't reach a verdict. And that's when the judge, as you just saw there, declared that mistrial.
And I know a lot of people were curious as to what was going to happen if the jury continued to be in a deadlock. Obviously, earlier in the week, we saw them come back and say they couldn't make a unanimous decision. All jurors have to be on the same page. And so the question turned from whether or not they were going to get a verdict, but also what would happen if they were to come back deadlock, and if the judge would continue to ask them to deliberate. As we've spoken before, the judge, there's no limit as to how many times the judge can ask a jury to deliberate. She very well today could have came back and said, continue deliberating once again and go back in that jury room. I believe Riley Mack said that at this point they have deliberated 20 hours to get that decision, and in all those 20 hours twice, they've come to the judge and said that they were deadlocked.
Well, of course, we just heard from expert Tanya Kraus-Phelan from Cooley Law School. She joined us live a couple of minutes ago talking about how, you know, at this point, with all of the things that the jury had heard, and then, of course, with that voluntary manslaughter option tacked on at the very end, she did acknowledge it could become confusing for a jury to be able to consider all of the things in which they heard. So not only the testimony, but of course that voluntary manslaughter charge that they were also now able to consider after the fact. And again, it just goes to show how big of a decision this was for not only just the defense and prosecution cases, but also just for the people who were charged with being the jurors on this case. They had a really big decision to make, and of course, ultimately, both experts saying it comes as no surprise that this is the result that we're left with within this trial.
And now this decision really lies within the prosecution. Does Prosecutor Becker say, no, I believe that there's still a trial here, and comes back? Does he come back with a plea agreement to a lesser charge? You know, is voluntary manslaughter still on the table? That was not the initial charge that this case was surrounding around. It was the second-degree murder charge. Does he come back and say, okay, I'll give you this charge with less time, and what does the defense do? And there's just so many outcomes that could happen at this point, and it's important for people to know who have been watching this trial for the last 3 years. There is no timeline as to right now what could happen. We could very well see this happen next week. The judge could have time for the prosecution and defense to come back and do this trial again. She could come back and say, I have free time in the next year. We all have to wait till then. So there's a lot of factors as to what could happen in the next coming days, months, and even years.
I'm just looking over some of my notes, and one thing that we were hearing from the expert, Andrew Rodenhouse, was that something that the prosecution and defense can now do is ask those jurors questions if they will talk to them. Because now that the trial is over with this mistrial declaration, they are now allowed to speak to those jurors, ask them, all right, what did you like in the presentation on both sides? What experts here worked for you? What was the main issue that people had a contention on while they were in the deliberation room? There are a lot of factors that these people could tell the prosecution and defense as to why they went the way they did. And again, it only took one person to kind of lock things up there. Not saying it did, but of course it could be several people or one person. It's 10:37. Joining us live now is Callie Lichter, a reporter who's been covering this since day one and even during jury selection. Callie, good morning to you. I know that things were kind of a little hectic as we went into court. It happened very quick, I'll say. And then, of course, as that ruling was made, people started to trickle out of the court. So what can you tell us now?
Yeah, you know, when I got a text, or, you know, our team down here got a text from our Riley Mack, who was in the courtroom, saying, guys, we're going in, and we saw some movement on that feed when we were sitting there in the media room. You know, we were like, oh my God, it's time, but we didn't know what it was time for. You know, a couple days ago, we saw the jury was deadlocked, you know, like was ruled today, so we didn't know if they were going to come back still deadlocked, or we were going to get a guilty or not guilty verdict. So it was just really, you know, I keep on saying that the energy was just different today. You know, it's been 4 days of us sitting at the courthouse anticipating a verdict, but today was kind of the day where everyone was like, all right, it feels a little bit different. It feels like something's going to happen today.
And Callie, you know, there's a lot going on in terms of what could happen next. You know, we kind of broken down what could happen next, but from your perspective, you've been covering this trial all along. You've also been our crime reporter here at 13 on Your Side, kind of talking about moving forward after this mistrial.
Yeah, so we've been talking about the options, Lauren, about what can come next, and that really falls on Kent County Prosecutor Chris Becker on what he decides should be the next steps. He could go for a retrial, he could offer, some type of plea deal, or he could choose to, dismiss the case, say that it's over, let Christopher Schurr go free. And so it's really up to him and what he chooses to do. But this has been going on for 3 years. Christopher Schurr was charged 3 years ago. This happened 3 years ago. There's so much which has happened in the past 3 years, from calling in witnesses, collecting exhibits, finding people to testify out on that stand on both sides, both the prosecution and the defense. And, it depends on the judge's schedule. It depends on all these different factors. So like we've been saying, it could be a while, if it is chosen to have another trial for a retrial, it could be a long time before we see that. And, you saw in the courtroom at times how, contentious everything got with certain witnesses who were put on the stand, particularly how the defense wasn't quite happy that Seth Stoughton and Nick Bloomfield took the stand for the prosecution. You had those types of moments in the courtroom, and you had some really heated cross-examinations and examinations. So it's really just a waiting game on what comes next, on what the decision is. And again, it could take a long time because this is already 3 years in the making. So again, none of us are in the minds of, the attorneys in the case, and we can all speculate. But really at this time, it's just a waiting to see what kind of the, almost, in a casual way, the vibe is from both sides. And, what they decide is the best way moving forward.
And something that we are waiting to see, and something that we know will happen today, is a press conference, rather, on both sides here. We're waiting on a press conference, not only with the Leoya family, but also we know that we have a press conference with the prosecution as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they plan to say. Let's actually go to where those are going to be held. Josh Roberts is live in the media room where those pressers will be held. Josh, can you kind of walk us through what's happening there right now?
Yeah, so as you guys already kind of alluded to, we are expecting on Zoom or via virtual format to hear from the civil attorneys as well as the Leoya family on their end. But here in the media room, we are going to be expecting to hear from the prosecution and possibly the defense as well. I think the biggest question is really going to be whether or not Prosecutor Becker is going to address whether or not he's going to retrial this, whether he's going to call a new trial in the wake of this hung jury. So we're going to have to wait and see that. But it's interesting what we're going to see from both them as well as outside as well. I mean, we had been hearing the possibility for demonstrations the evening of the verdict day, whatever day that may have been. Now that we have perhaps as close as we're going to get to a verdict in this current case, whether or not that's going to happen, whether that's going to materialize, and whether or not we're going to see those kind of demonstrations and kind of some of the tension that we saw even just a couple days ago when we had maybe been expecting a verdict, but we didn't actually get one.
Well, Josh, I'm curious because you've also been covering this trial since day one. I'm curious, as this news comes out that a mistrial has been declared, from your perspective, what were the reactions where you were at in the courthouse as this happened?
Yeah, so we were actually outside the courtroom when that happened. I mean, we started to see deputies like pull back the line, where the line had been formed with that kind of roped off area. So we had kind of gotten a little bit of an indication something was going to happen here. What at the point we didn't know, but even if we were on the 10th floor, I kind of looked down onto the street to see kind of what was transpiring at the time. As it was happening, it was pretty, as it had been all morning, pretty quiet. But I know whether or not things have changed, we're going to have to see what transpires over the rest of the day. As I mentioned, there may be more demonstrations this afternoon, given that we're in not a verdict day, but kind of a close to this trial kind of day. And what happens there, I mean, I think it's anybody's guess, but it's certainly come to a point over the last week that the community very much is invested in this case on either side or even in the middle. We heard a lot of people, kind of on this spectrum. There were people who were saying, even if they were, supportive of one side or the other, even if they were not, a lot of people were indicating to us, they just hoped things would be peaceful, that the community would find a way to move forward, whether the verdict was guilty, whether it was acquitted, or whether or not we had a hung jury. Whatever the final outcome was, they were hoping that this was going to remain peaceful and that the city was going to be able to continue to move forward and kind of heal after whatever happened at the end of this trial.
And Josh, I know a lot of people are anxious to hear from both sides. Do we know relatively any idea of what time we could be hearing from Prosecutor Becker or the Leoya family?
Yeah, we're expecting to hear from the family and their civil attorneys within the next hour, but when it comes to the prosecutor and possibly the defense as well coming here, we are not aware of exactly when that is going to happen. We're kind of staking out here to see when that is going to happen, but we're not sure of an exact timeline. We just know that the family is expected to be on that virtual presser within the hour.
All right, that is Josh Albertus live from the briefing room. That we will see what happens as we expect all of those press conferences here in just a second. Joining us live now is Riley Mack, another reporter for 13 on Your Side that has been covering this. If you've been following us on 13onyourside.com, you know that she has been the one populating that live blog since day one. Riley, good morning to you once again. I'm curious what the state of the courthouse where you're at is at this time. Of course, we are about an hour removed from the mistrial news. So what are things looking like where you're at?
Absolutely. Yeah, you guys, right now it feels like a lot of hurry up and wait, which is pretty much what this whole trial has been, what this whole week has been, honestly. We had 20 hours of jury deliberation, and through that time, my role was just waiting outside the courtroom to try to get into that really small courtroom once there was a verdict. So yeah, a lot of hurry up and wait again here as we wait to hear from the prosecutor and the Leoya family on their reactions, also the defense and Christopher Schurr if he plans on speaking. But yeah, we were called into the courtroom at 9:30 this morning, and this morning, you expect these big reactions from a verdict in the courtroom, but there really wasn't one in this case. You could kind of hear a pin drop in that courtroom, and that just goes to show kind of the underwhelming ending to this, really high-profile case. And it feels like a lot more of that here as we just wait to hear what's next from the prosecutor if he plans to retry this case.
And Riley, kind of walk us through the atmosphere, not only leaving the courtroom, but also now. It's been about an hour since we heard that it was a mistrial. Have things kind of simmered down at this point at the courthouse?
Yeah, I definitely think they have. Throughout the week, tensions have been really high. The crowd to try to get in the courtroom was bigger on some days as we were kind of waiting to see the verdict, and then it kind of thinned out as people were maybe losing their patience with the jury. When they announced on Tuesday, I believe it was, that the jury was deadlocked, we were kind of losing our patience at that point. Some of the supporters went home and didn't join that line again. But it really feels like today is a more calm reaction because we have no decision one way or the other. No side has been chosen in this case. So you can certainly feel that here, the kind of calm atmosphere here.
And Riley, I know you're actually pretty high up, and I'm trying to figure out if you're pointed towards more of the downtown buildings right behind you. From your vantage point, I know that we had supporters for the Leoya family still outside, but there's nothing crazy going on outside. And I just want people to reiterate that because I'm looking at Facebook comments and people are like, should I avoid downtown? At this point, from what we've been reporting, no. Is that the case from your vantage point up there?
Yeah, no, it's really not. We've been peeking out the windows. The courthouse building is a lot of windows. So, throughout the day, throughout the week, I've been peeking out to see the crowds down there. And honestly, today is a really slow day for demonstrators out there. I feel like at the beginning of the week, the end of last week, we saw a lot more. But yeah, today the crowds are pretty thin. I'm wondering if, maybe later once people get out of work, if those crowds will, start getting bigger. But I don't know. I think because we don't have an opinion one way or the other in the case, there's not a whole lot that you can, really fight over in this case, maybe to retry. But yeah, the crowds are pretty thin right now. I wouldn't avoid downtown definitely because of this.
Yeah, it's not one of those things that, we've seen demonstrators outside. That's one thing, but to say, on social media that the most extreme case of this is happening is just not.
Yeah, it's not happening at all. Well, Riley, you were in the courtroom. For those who are just joining us, can you gonna just walk us through how quickly this decision came? It seems like like you said, it's been 20 hours of deliberations, but actually hearing that it was a mistrial was a very quick situation there.
Absolutely. As I've been saying, my role was to try to get in that courtroom to see the reaction to the verdict because, we were only allowed one camera allowed in that courtroom, one video camera to get those reactions. So we needed someone inside to be able to report on, all the different reactions, Patrick Leoya's family, Schurr's family, Schurr himself. And so I had to be in there to wait outside the courtroom. And, when I got in there, we were called in at 9:30 and I knew I had to wait in line for this whole time because I knew it would move pretty quickly once we got a verdict. The judge came in, I believe it was about 20 minutes later. She said immediately that this was a hung jury and that's the final decision. Within a couple minutes, the jury was in. We all stood for the jury. They walked in, and she said, this is the verdict. This is the end of this. Thank you all for being here, and sent everyone home within a minute, and that was it. It was a really quick. It just goes to show you again how quickly everything changed in this trial. We had 20 hours of jury deliberation, and then the trial is over just like that. We've also had 3 years of just preparing for this trial. We've had weeks of testimony, and within a minute, it's all done.
All right, Riley Mack reporting live for us from the Kent County Courthouse directly after that verdict. Riley, stand by. We appreciate your reporting. Let's go live now to Micah Cho, who's standing by for us now. Micah, good morning to you. Where are you at and what are you seeing at this point?
Yeah, good morning, Tanner. We're actually on the back side of the courthouse. So where Aaron and Deja are, we're on the exact opposite side of that. And right now, we are currently waiting to see Christopher Schurr exit the Kent County Courthouse. I know all morning we've been talking about how quiet it is. The back side off of, I think this is on the other side of Ionia. It's no different here. There are I'll just step out of the way so we can kind of see some of the police presence here. We have about around a dozen sheriff's deputies and Michigan State police officers. And actually in that van, it just pulled up maybe not 2 minutes before we went live here. That has about, I think, 4 tactical officers in it as well, wearing helmets and heavy armor as well. And over here, we're just going to kind of shift this camera. It's kind of hard to see from the vantage point that we're at right now. We kind of have to keep clear just in case any cars kind of come and go out of this area. But there's a parking ramp right here. It leads underground beneath the courthouse. This is where we believe that Christopher Schurr will be coming out of. We've heard that he's been coming to and from the courthouse every morning and afternoon in a white van. I know that a lot earlier this week in the mornings that we've seen Christopher Schurr kind of leave or enter the courthouse through where all the supporters and protesters are of his. But then earlier this morning, I know that Aaron and Deja said that Christopher Schurr possibly went in through the back, and this is where we believe that he came in, and again, this is where we believe that he will be exiting from. About 40 minutes ago, the reason why we came down here about 40 minutes ago, we were told that Christopher Schurr was heading downstairs. So these officers have been here for maybe about 40 minutes to an hour, so have we. And we're just waiting to see if he comes out, if he stops to talk with us. We don't know if he's going to be leaving this in a van or if he's going to be kind of coming out and the van's going to be across the street. We have no idea what's going on right now. But I will say, too, every once in a while we've had a Kent County Sheriff's deputy. I think maybe this happened about twice, actually. We've had a deputy come over and say, hey, we need this area clear. We're about to have a vehicle come out, and that vehicle just never came out of that parking ramp. So we're going to continue just to stay here and kind of monitor the situation, see if he comes out again, see if he does want to talk to us. So for now, we're outside the Kent County Courthouse. Mike Cho, 13.
And Micah, just real quick, for people who maybe have to travel in that area, are they blocking off that street? Can people drive on that street or even walk on that sidewalk? Or are they kind of keeping that area closed off?
No, this is, it's very, we've seen dozens of people. We even saw a crowd of people not related to this trial walk down the sidewalk here. It's very open right now. There again, it's just these officers, and you can actually see a couple of pedestrians here. They'll come on through. So it's very open, is what I'm trying to say. It's very open, and it's very quiet, just like what we've seen, inside the courthouse, also on Ottawa. Not a lot of protesters or supporters out here on this side as well.
Micah, while we have you, I know that we had some demonstrators outside the courthouse, as you just mentioned. In your travels to the downtown area or maybe around some of the places that you've been looking at, have you seen any more demonstrations downtown?
No, this is the same. Really, we have a pretty good vantage point, up and down the street here. And it's just, it's very quiet. It kind of still has that, kind of solemn feel to, what a lot of people are feeling. There was not really a decision one way or the other. And so, it's kind of reflecting that out here as, there are a couple of people out here. But it is very quiet. It's very quiet. There's not a lot of activity going on. We did see a couple protesters kind of make their way back here maybe about 15 minutes ago. We have seen them as Patrick Leoya supporters earlier. They looked like they were grabbing coffee, and they kind of hung out here for a little bit. So we didn't know if there was going to be kind of any interactions with them and the police, but but they left, and again, it's been pretty quiet out here.
Well, Micah, we thank you for giving us a report on the back of the courthouse. We are starting to hear more reaction from people all over this case. We did receive a statement from the I just said it wrong. The Fraternal Order of Police State Lodge of Michigan. It's a very long statement, so I'm only going to read a part of it, but they said today's outcome in the trial of Grand Rapids Police Officer Christopher Schurr, a hung jury, highlights the deep complexity surrounding this case, the difficult position law enforcement officers face when forced to make split-second decisions in high-stress situations. We'll probably have this full statement up on our website, but again, people are still starting to react to this hung jury.
Yeah, this is some of the first reactions we've seen, right? Of course, we're waiting on more reactions, so that's just one piece of the puzzle here, the FOP reacting to that, but then we also have Chris Becker, the prosecutor, who's due to make a statement as well to members of the media. We also have, hopefully, the defense team also going to be making a statement very soon along with the prosecutor. The other thing that we are going to be hearing from is the Leoya family, and of course the lawyers representing them in this civil lawsuit that's still pending. We do want to go and check back out on the other side of the courthouse, where the opposite side where Micah was. We have Deja and Aaron joining us live once again for more reaction, and we join them now live. Good morning, Deja and Aaron. What are you guys seeing at this point?
Tanner, good morning. So we are echoing the same story that Micah has on the backside of the courthouse here out front. Not a whole lot happening. Very quiet given the news that was released earlier this morning. There's about a handful, maybe a little bit more of Patrick Leoya supporters out here this much, but this is just about all we're seeing. Not a whole lot of vocal expressions right now, just folks sitting. Earlier, they were consoling each other, and many of them expressing their disbelief and saying that how the declaring of a mistrial was unfair. So again, this is what we're seeing. Extremely quiet out here in front of the Kent County Courthouse. And as far as Tanner, you mentioned about the traffic, folks on Facebook, social media were asking, is wide open here downtown off Ottawa and Lyons. So traffic is flowing. Not a whole lot going on, Aaron.
No, but I will say one thing we have noticed, especially if you're just joining us, there's not a lot of Schurr supporters out here. There were a few this morning waving their Blue Lives Matter flags with the American flag with that blue stripe down the middle. But I will say one woman was here asking, hey, where are the Schurr supporters? And we did tell her there's no one here. So it did seem like she ended up leaving the scene.
Yeah.
But like Deja said, few Leoya supporters here, but not the noise that a lot of people that have been writing into us were expecting. So if you're writing in and asking, is there a riot? Are there massive demonstrations? The answer is no.
Right. We're not seeing a whole lot of that. A little surprising, though, to not see the Schurr supporters out here.
Right.
Over a dozen were out here earlier this morning, of course, expressing their opinions and their voices in this matter. But again, really clear, not a whole lot, typically down this sidewalk here in front of Kenton County Courthouse, but we're right here on the corner of Lyon and Ottawa, and not a whole lot happening, really quiet. Traffic is open and flowing, and this is what we're seeing. And of course, we're waiting for folks. Of course, I know we're waiting for that press conference to take place, but not a whole lot of activity coming out of the courthouse either.
No.
So it was kind of rumored that Schurr had left the courtroom, the courthouse already. Again, we can't confirm that right now. But again, not a whole lot of activity of folks coming in and out of the courthouse. And so this is what we're seeing right now.
Right. We did hear that some security guards inside were saying that he did leave. But again, we want to make sure we have an official source telling us that. So we're definitely going to be asking more questions before you hear from all of us again.
All right, yeah, thank you so much for that clarification again. Yeah, it's been one of the questions, has he left the courthouse yet? And of course, Micah Cho is standing by on that parking ramp that we believe if anybody were to come out, that would be the area where that would happen. I think we have a live look inside of the press briefing room that we are expecting a press conference any moment now. You can kind of see that podium there, of course, as we await to hear from the prosecution and the defense on this case after a mistrial has been declared as we approach the 11 o'clock hour. And the other thing we're also waiting to hear from is the family of Patrick Leoya. We're also waiting to hear from the attorneys that represent the family in a civil lawsuit case right now as well.
And we've heard from them quite a lot during the last 3 years. They've been very vocal. So we are expecting them to continue to be vocal. The one group that we are hoping to hear from is Christopher Schurr's side. We've made multiple attempts to speak with them before the trial, obviously them wanting to focus on the trial. We heard from Schurr for the first time in 3 years during his testimony, and since then we haven't heard from him. So it'll be interesting to see if the defense lets us get a chance to kind of go pick their brain to kind of understand what that side is thinking about.
And of course, you're watching this all unfold live. We've been live with you since about 9:30ish as we started to hear that, I won't say verdict because that's not a verdict, the decision in the trial, the declaration made as that mistrial happened. And again, that is a mistrial in the Christopher Schurr trial. So if you're just joining us right now, we want to let you know that basically the jury, again, for the second time, said that they cannot come to a conclusion. They submitted that statement to the judge in writing, and then the judge called the court back in around 9:30 this morning. I mean, there was kind of, I won't say frantic, but I mean, there was a big rush for everybody to start getting into the courtroom. We saw the prosecutor and the prosecution side team go in, and then we also saw the defense team with Christopher Schurr come in as well. The room there of the courthouse fill up, and then that is when the jury said, we can't reach that decision. The judge ultimately declaring a mistrial.
And again, for those who have not maybe been watching our coverage and are interested to know what was on the table, it was a second-degree murder charge, voluntary manslaughter charge, and then obviously an acquittal for Schurr. And all they had to agree on one of those options altogether unanimously, not majority altogether, and they could not do that. The judge had the opportunity to ask them to go and continue to deliberate. She did that once on Tuesday, saying that enough time had not passed, but clearly she believed enough time had passed to call for a mistrial in this case after the jury came back today.
A lot of time did pass. We had 7 or 8 days of testimony and then 4 days of deliberations in this case. And again, that jury came back. All right, we are getting word that the prosecutor is on his way to the press room. So as we get that, we will bring that to you live. Let's go ahead and go to Prosecutor Chris Becker after the mistrial declaration.
There we get set. Let me know when everybody's ready. I'll get going. Obviously, this was not the what happened today is not what anybody was expecting or wanted. We're hoping for a verdict, and I think the family, and I don't know if they've talked here, but they're extremely disappointed, as am I. This was something we were hoping to get a conclusion. We thought we'd put a good case forward. Obviously, the jury thought differently. They were hung. I spent quite a bit of time talking with them. They're very open, and they're really a good jury. I mean, they paid attention. They took a lot of notes. They obviously were in there for a long period of time and took this case seriously. So this is, this happens. This happens quite a bit in general cases, but especially if you look across the country, there's a number of police-involved incidents where it ends up in a hung jury quite a bit. So we always knew there was a possibility. It's a difficult case. This was not an easy case. This was not a simple case. So at this point in time, I'm sure the next question is, what am I going to do? And I'm not going to make a decision right now. This is something I'm going to take some of the jurors obviously wanted to talk more. They may be reaching out, so I'm going to talk to them and take a look at everything, and I'll make a decision somewhere down the road. I'm not making a decision today.
Do you know how they were divided?
I do, but I'm not going to.
Talk about that?
Nope, I'm not going to say
It
that.
was close one way or the other.
I do, but I'm not going to get into the jury what the jury said. That's something that they told us in confidence, so I'm just going to hold it close to the vest. I know what it was, and so at this point in time, I'm not going to disclose that.
Is that going to help you decide whether to take this to trial again, what their vote was?
Yeah, it's a factor. I mean, definitely it's a factor. It's something that's kind of what I asked them. I want to get their feedback in terms of what the issues were. Just, talking to them, I can say they were on point. I mean, they were debating, sometimes you go back into a jury and you're like, what in the world where did you come up with that? What were you debating on that for? That was not the case here. They were on point. They were discussing the issues that I think both sides had. Obviously, there's a split in terms of what, who was believing one and which side. So this was, they were on point in terms of what they were discussing. So they were very thorough. So, it's going to be a factor, but I'm not going to say, well, because of this, I'm going to decide one way. It's still my decision ultimately based on all the facts and circumstances and looking at our case, looking at the defense case and what's going to happen down the road. So I talked to the family and I said, give me some time. We're all digesting this at this point in time, and it's something I'm going to talk with them too, because I think their feelings should play a role. So it's a process, and I'm not going to rush into it, and we'll go from there.
Can you share what some of the issues were that the jury
Just like just like we argued, just like the argument was, was was it the moment of the shot was fired? Was that what you're supposed to look at, or is it looking at the totality of the circumstances? More, I was arguing. Was the taser a dangerous weapon or not a dangerous weapon? It's basically what you saw in the trial and what the two sides focused on, respectively. That's essentially what they were focusing on, which I appreciate. I mean, they definitely knew what the issues were, and it sounds like they had a very thorough debate on those. And they couldn't reach a decision, which is not uncommon. So I'm not criticizing them at all. I've never had a jury take that many notes and ask the amount of questions, and quite frankly, very good questions. So they were clearly engaged, clearly dedicated, and I appreciate their work they did.
The jury foreperson came out and she looked really upset.
She was not. She talked about this. She's like, I know. She just slipped and hit her chin. So.
And the FOP Lodge, State Lodge of Michigan, put out a press release just a little while ago, basically saying that public pressure is what led you to file these charges.
No public pressure. If I had public pressure, just stuck my thumb up in the air and went with that. That had nothing to do with it. I base every decision based on the facts and based on what I think I can prove. This is not, I don't bow to public pressure because there's a lot of cases I wouldn't issue or would issue based on what the public wants. I don't do that. So it had nothing to do with public presser.
Given the results of this, do you have any second thoughts about bringing this
No.
charge in the first place?
No, I don't. No, if I didn't believe in the case, I should have been trying it. It's a difficult case. This is not an easy case. I've been involved in a number of officer-involved incidents where I've cleared them, and if I clear them, that's because I believe it shouldn't go forward. This is one I felt, given all the facts and circumstances, that deserved to go forward. And so it's not a regret that we got a hung jury, and I'm not surprised at a hung jury. This was a difficult case, and you've seen the split in the community. You've seen the jury was there was issues there. So that doesn't change because if you just try you charge a case to win it, you shouldn't be doing this job because that's not your job. Sometimes they're going to be tough, difficult cases. This is a difficult one. It's difficult for the community, and so but I still stand by the decision to charge.
Can you talk about what this has done to your relationship between your office and the Grand Rapids Police Department?
I've said this before. This has been pending for 3 years, and I'm preparing for a trial in 2 weeks with Grand Rapids Police Department. They're professional. We're professional. Clearly, there's people over there that don't agree with this decision, and I respect them. There are some people I probably respect. Nobody's confronted me. I think we still have a relationship. It's a working relationship, and I think it's, we agree to disagree, but we still understand our roles and understand what we have to do for the community and protect the citizens. And, we disagree on a case, but I think there's plenty of cases that we still work together on and work together very effectively.
The lesser included offense of voluntary manslaughter, was that something requested by you? And if so, when was it requested?
It's a necessary lesser included of a second-degree murder, so that's common for any, I've never had a murder case where it didn't get included unless the facts didn't show it, and I think clearly with the facts here. So yeah, we did request it, but that's just the normal, because it's a necessary lesser included offense.
Can you say whether they had like dismissed the second-degree murder and were looking more
No,
toward manslaughter? Can you talk anything?
no, I don't know. We never got into that deep, so I really don't know how much what they were focusing on, in terms of.
You rely on the possession of the taser question. You put up experts who, in their testimony, said he never had full possession. The defense showed their version of the video where you see it in his hand. How much did that affect the case? Did that affect jurors? And does it affect the way you present the case going forward?
Oh, it definitely affected jurors because they were debating on that. I mean, that was one of the things they were looking at, is the taser. What was he intending to do with it? What was it in his possession? So I think that was a key issue that both sides focused on, and they definitely looked at it. I can't get into their deliberations on how much it felt, but if I make the decision to retry it, that's something we'll take a look at and look, get the transcripts and go over it. And is there something we could have done differently? Is there what every time you have a case, it's the same case, but you're probably not going to do it the exact same way, and things are going to come out differently. So, it is part of the case, and it's an issue, but, we'll see what happens.
So when speaking to the jury, I mean, can you talk about the emotions in that room when you're speaking with them? Are they pretty?
Yeah, to be honest, I think they were, there were some emotions, but, I've been in hung jury where you can tell, oh my gosh, I think these people are going to kill each other. And this was not that. I didn't get that feel. There was, they disagreed. There's, definitely some tension, but they got along and they seemed to be, really trying to make an effort. So I didn't get the feel that it was like, a knockdown, drag out or anything like that. They, you brought from citizens of Kent County. They did the best they could. They had differences of opinion, but I think they were, talking about it, and it wasn't, hostile, at least the sense I got when I was talking with them.
Sorry about that. Sure. Do you think, the first time the jury came back and said, we're first up, Judge Mims sent them back in, this time she declared a mistrial. Do you think had they been sent back again, they could have eventually reached a verdict?
No. No, this is, the note came back saying, basically, I don't think she read the whole note, but the note was, hey, I think one of the instructions is don't, give up your deeply held personal beliefs to just reach a verdict. And that was phrased in the note essentially saying, hey, if you want us to debate more, somebody's going to have to do that. And so that's the time, and Judge Mims made a correct decision saying, yep, we've come as far as you can. So I don't think would have done anything more.
Did you receive an indication that the needle moved at all from Tuesday when you were still?
They gave us an idea, and there was movement. Yeah, definitely. It wasn't, they've been sitting in the same position for 3 days. So they definitely exchanged ideas, and there was changes.
Was you surprised by this outcome?
No, like I said, you look at across the country. I mean, I think I just found out the Memphis, that Memphis case went through, and that was a hung jury before. There was one in Detroit, a state trooper, that was a hung jury. These types of cases bring divisions, and people have strong opinions, and so I'm not surprised. I always thought this is a definite possibility that we're not going to get a verdict, and that's what happened.
So if you retried this, I mean, did you change your strategy somehow?
Well, I'm not going to tell you that now. So, I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do now, so I've not even thought about what I'm going to do if I do decide to make the decision to retry it. So, yeah.
Should the case be tried again, what would the difficulty in finding a jury pool that's not tainted?
Yeah, which I think the surprising thing is, I mean, we had an pretty extensive questionnaire that it's kind of, you guys are all here, and then how many people said, oh, we don't watch the news, to some extent, and that's kind of surprising. But, I thought we went faster in terms of picking a jury. We left a week because we thought, there'd be so many people that saw it and had an opinion and weren't going to be fair. And for the most part, there's a lot of people that didn't see it and didn't have an impact. This is maybe a little bit fresher, obviously, since this was 3 years ago versus, whenever if there is another trial, when that's going to be. But I think it's always amazing when you get into I've done a number of high-profile cases, how many people are like, oh, don't hear anything about it, don't know anything about it. I mean, there's a number of people that never heard about this case. So I'm not as concerned but probably have to go the same process.
What's the timeline you're thinking of on a decision of what's next?
I'm not going to let this drag out. I mean, I'm going to, be considerate of the community. I mean, this is a big decision, but I'm not going to rush through it. But I'm not going to sit here and, it's not going to be June. I don't have a specific timeline, but I hope to know relatively quickly.
Seeing the outcome, how do you think you guys did on selecting a jury?
Like I said, they were very dedicated. I mean, they're a very dedicated group. You never know. Every time you go in, you'd like to think, they're going to come to a verdict and everything. But this happens. This is a difficult case, and this was a very engaged jury. They were, like I said, I've never seen this many notes being taken. I've never seen that many questions. I've never seen that many good questions. I mean, sometimes you get really dumb questions, and this, for the most part, this jury was not that. So, yeah, I think this was a good jury, and they did the best they could and didn't come to a conclusion. But that doesn't reflect on this was a bad jury because of that.
Do you think it was a factor that one of the jurors said her partner is a police officer?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe everybody that we asked the questionnaires, thought they could, you can't just exclude people because they have, a partner or know somebody that's a police officer. So, at the time we made the decision, it seemed to be fair and impartial. They all represented that. So. Okay. Take one or two more, because.
You didn't use all of your challenges during jury selection. What led to the contentment between both you and the defense? Who also had challenges?
Well, you always get, they had more than me. So at the time when they had 4 left, I had 2 left. So I was kind of putting myself in a position. So at that point in time, I was fairly satisfied with the jury, and I didn't want to, put myself in a situation where all of a sudden I got none, and they still could strike, and then I'm stuck with somebody who I really don't like. So that was just, it was a strategic move based on I thought I liked the jury. You don't want to get too cute. Just use the preemptories, just to use the preemptories, and then you're stuck. So.
If there is a retrial, is there any talk about the change in venue?
I would doubt it. I don't see why. Like I just said, I don't see why there would be. It's we've had enough people that didn't hear about the case, or when we picked this one, I don't think it's going to be an issue.
Could you talk more about the reaction of the Leoya parents? How the emotions after this you've met with them?
Yeah, I met with them. They're disappointed. This has been a long truck for them. I mean, this has gone on longer than most cases, as you're familiar with. This is we're 3 years afterwards, and here we just got done with a trial where a lot of times we've maybe in the appeals process or it's over. So this is I've talked with them. They're amazingly patient. They're amazingly understanding. But I think they're frustrated, obviously. So, okay, thank you.
Obviously, a very thorough questioning of Prosecutor Becker, who just spoke for the first time after a mistrial was declared. One of the biggest questions is, what is he going to do next? He did not have an answer for us. We also did have okay, so we do want to toss back out to Micah Cho, who's outside. It looks like possibly Schurr is leaving the bag. Micah, what are you seeing right now?
Yeah, I'm not going to step inside the camera frame just so that we can kind of keep an eye on what's going on right here. About maybe a minute ago, maybe less than, the tactical car that I kind of pointed out.
We're now going to the defense to hear their response. Take a listen.
You can't get 12 people off the street to agree as to a very important decision. So I thank them for all the work they did. Some of them were willing to talk to us, and so my sense is that they worked very hard to come to a conclusion, and sometimes you just can't.
Can you talk about the reaction from Christopher Schurr?
He's been living with this for 3 years. He obviously wanted some resolution. I think he felt that the jury took the time to deliberate, and he appreciates that. He obviously wanted it to be done, but it's a hung jury. So I haven't had much chance, obviously, to talk to him yet because I've been talking to the jurors. So he'll probably have to reflect on it, as we all will, and as will Mr. Becker, on how we proceed next.
What do you think about the possibility of a retrial? What do you think should happen?
I do not think this case should be retried. I don't think it should have been charged in the first place. I think that it was clear, based on the evidence, that there wasn't enough to establish a charge in this case. I think there was a lot of evidence at trial that was irrelevant and that shouldn't come in. And so if there is going to be another trial, we're going to likely seek rulings from appellate courts as to what evidence is put before the jury. In particular, I do not believe that this theory that was sponsored by Professor Stoughton, how an officer can put himself in jeopardy by following what he believes to be poor policies of GRPD, where he loses the right to defend himself should he later be put in a position where someone is about to use, he's an imminent threat of bodily harm or death. I think that's absolutely wrong. I think the jury was confused by the fact that the prosecutor was saying that he cannot defend himself because he screwed up on whether or not he should chase him. I think that had effect on the outcome and the fact that they couldn't reach a unanimous verdict. And so if there is going to be another trial, we're going to be asking the Court of Appeals to decide whether officer-created jeopardy is something that should apply in a criminal case, and whether officers, if they make any negligent act early on, they can no longer defend themselves if someone turns on them with a dangerous weapon.
Were there a number of appealable issues that you saw during this trial?
Yes.
Can you talk about those, other than what you just spoke of?
Substantively, that's the main issue. And, you know, to those that are following legal opinions, there was a U.S. Supreme Court case just in the last 6 months called Barnes v. Felix, where this exact issue was argued extensively. I think that, you know, this officer-created jeopardy is incredibly dangerous, not only for police officers who are asked to put themselves in dangerous positions, but for the community. Because what's going to happen if you instruct officers that they cannot arrest somebody, and it's up to the person being arrested to decide whether they're not going to be arrested, you're going to see a lot of officers who are going to hold back and be instructed that if later on this person has a gun or gets a dangerous weapon and uses it on me, I can no longer defend myself because I've screwed something up early on. So that's the primary appeal issue. We, as you know, Mr. Coker, we briefed that extensively before the trial. We tried to exclude it all for the trial, but yet it became the central issue. It's clear to me, and if you listen to the prosecutor's closing statement, that he talked about the chase and whether or not that was reasonable, when the issue should have been whether at the moment of the threat, whether Christopher Schurr was in fear of great bodily harm or death, and whether he acted as a reasonable officer would in that situation. So that's,
sorry.
Go ahead, Duncan, right?
Sam.
Sam, sorry.
The decision for Schurr to testify, how and when was that made?
We anticipated he would testify, and you know, as we saw the proofs come in, we felt that it was important for the jury to hear from him, because you know, it's a case where what he was thinking, what he was feeling is important. And while there were plenty of experts on both sides to talk about whether it was reasonable, the only person that could say what was in his head is Chris. And you know, it was a matter of, well, if something happens where he shouldn't testify, we won't have him testify. But the plan was he was going to testify unless something happened.
Do you know how that played with the jury? Have you spoken to the jury about his testimony, what difference that made at all?
I think they considered it. I don't think anybody thought he was dishonest in his testimony. Obviously, we didn't talk to a lot of the jurors, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of what they're telling us, but I think it played a role, but wasn't the dispositive witness.
You can't tell us how close they were one way or the other? Was it 11 to 1 one way, another way, you know, half to 50-50? Can you talk about that?
It was overwhelmingly in favor of acquittal, and there were holdouts on the other side.
How many holdouts?
I don't know for sure.
How long were you talking to the jury after the mistrial was declared?
I don't know, from the time of the mistrial until I came down here, I don't know how long that was.
During close, you had mentioned that you didn't have to put on a defense, but you did because of the importance of the case. Moving forward, should this be retried again. Are there different approaches that you may take? I know you can't get too much into strategy, but were there things that you left out this time that maybe you think next time would be appropriate to bring in?
It's kind of speculative. I don't know. It would depend on what the trial looks like going forward. I mean, if we're arguing about whether or not he was negligent in chasing him, then I'm going to have to address that again. I just don't think that that should have been ever put before the jury. And because it came down to whether or not GRPD's policy or no policy on foot pursuits had some sort of bearing on whether or not he can use deadly force to protect himself. And I mean, I think over half the trial was about irrelevant evidence. You had experts on both sides talking about how close you can stand to somebody when they deploy their taser. I don't know how that relates to a minute and a half later when Mr. Leoya has exclusive control of the taser and is turning. It shouldn't matter. I was flummoxed by the fact that an expert could get on the stand and say, because you're too close, Mr. Leoya grabbed the taser. That was a decision that was made by the individuals that were in that situation, and not because of some GRPD policy.
Matt, you asked for a mistrial on my count 3 times, maybe it was 2.5. And Judge Mims said you put something in the motion about rolling her eyes. What did you think of the judge in this case? And was this a fair trial? You keep asking for a mistrial. Was it ultimately fair? Did she do a good job?
We asked for a mistrial, and the primary reason was because there was all this evidence put before the jury that we did not think was relevant, and that was the focus of the prosecution's case. As far as the allegations of facial expressions, we obviously don't make those allegations unless we're certain that they're occurring. It was a crowded courtroom. It was our belief that the judge had been communicating with the jury. Why she might be biased, we never suggested one way or the other. We just thought that her demeanor at times suggested that she had feelings about something that coincided with the testimony.
So someone on your defense team actually saw her rolling her eyes, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
How many times? Can you talk, was it often, was it frequent, one time?
Throughout the trial, we thought there were facial expressions and didn't raise it. And then when Officer Schurr testified, we believe that there were facial expressions that were communicating something to the jury, and that's why we filed the motion.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. When you said earlier that the jury was in favor of acquittal, do you mean acquittal on the second-degree murder charge or voluntary manslaughter or both?
Both.
So if you're just joining us live, you're looking live on the left side of your screen. The defense attorney for Christopher Schurr is speaking following the mistrial declaration. On the right side of your screen, the civil attorneys for the Leoya family, as well as much of the Leoya family, is also giving their remarks. And we're going to listen to that.
Shout out on behalf of the family and the entire community that surrounds and loves the Leoya family. Prosecutor Becker, in this case, did something that very few prosecutors have the guts to do in the United States today, let alone in West Michigan. And he saw what he perceived, and we agree 100% to be an injustice to such a degree by a police officer that he, as the main legal representative of Kent County, charged criminally former Officer Schurr with second-degree murder. And obviously, we agreed with those charges from the outset. We support Prosecutor Becker's decision to do so. And we encourage him, first of all, and thank him for he and his entire trial team. Angelica, the victim's advocate that was there for the family, all of these court people, if you will, from Kent County surrounded the family with love and support like they do every day in our courthouse. And we appreciate that and want to thank them. Not only did he bring criminal charges, but he himself, the main prosecutor, tried the case. Highly unusual. And we appreciate all that. And in this regard, of course, the fact that this jury could not make a determination either way, on behalf of the family, we encourage Prosecutor Becker to remain alongside this family and to move forward with a retrial because we believe that this officer should be brought to criminal justice, and we will certainly address the civil justice that we, Ben Crump and I and our team will be asking for as well. But I would like to move forward with any questions so that you can hear directly from the family in terms of their reaction, which is obviously highly disappointed, but again, encouraged from the standpoint of it was a not guilt. There was no finding of not guilty, which is so often the case. And one more thing, I want to give a shout out to the family of Tyree Nickel, the gentleman who was killed by 5 or 6 police officers in Memphis, Tennessee, who 3 of those officers were found not guilty just yesterday. So we believe that was a miscarriage of justice. And we again appreciate our prosecutor, Chris Becker, moving forward. And we appreciate the hard fight that the jurors who believed in criminal justice in this case, we thank them for what they tried to do for what we believe to be that supported by the evidence.
Then question from Carter Landis. How painful has this been for the family, waiting and leaving justice into the hands of the jury, all for them to not deliver a verdict?
Israel, please.
Anauliza kuko swali na kia pale anasema haenjo maumivu. Tulere gani njo munasikia kusema mulingo ya panda 3 ans, mupate justice mnafika kupwenye jiri haikukia kubapatia enye tulikuwa tunatafuta.
Kwa ngambo yangu mimi kama babake ya Patrick,
on my behalf, myself, like Patrick's father,
na familia yote,
and my entire family,
kwa kweli iko sawa, wanarudisha vidonda tena vinakuwa vipya.
It seemed like they reborn, we have a reborn of the wound and the image how my son was killed, he came back again.
Kuona kwa muda huu wa miaka mitatu tunasubiria ukweli wa kesi ya Patrick ya kuuawa.
To see that all these 3 years where we have been waiting for this case to be settled, but Patrick was killed.
Tulikuwa tunajua kama tumefika mwisho wa kesi na tunajua kama kwa kweli mtu akiuawa kinyume na sheria na tunapaswa kupigana na kupata sheria, lakini tunaona kama sheria inaenda kuyumbishwa.
And then we came here, we were fighting, and we get to the end. We thought that we were getting to the close of this case and we were going to get the justice, but we came to realize that it was a hung jury. They could not come to the agreement to condemn this guy or to find him guilty.
Kwa kweli tumeumia sana moyoni mwetu, lakini naendelea kushukuru timu yote ya waavoka wangu wenyewe wanaendelea kutusaidia na waaktiviste wote wenyewe wanaendelea kutusapoti, naendelea kuwashukuru na hatutachoka kamwe na kuendelea kupigana mpaka tupate justice ya Patrick.
But also I want to say that it hurt my family, my wife, we are bleeding, we are in pain, but I would like to thank all my legal team that have stood by me and my family have been fighting, and all the activists, all the members of the community who stood by us and fight and will continue to fight until when we get the true justice for Patrick.
Prosecutor wetu amepigana kabisa kwa hii kesi, ingawapo vitu vinaenda kuyumbishwa, lakini kwa kweli tunashukuru na lawyer wetu Johnson, wote kabisa na Womack kwa vita ambayo wamepigana mpaka kwa hii kipindi tumefika.
Yeah, Mr. Becker, the prosecutor, he fought, he did a good job till to the end to get a justice for my son, Patrick. Mr. Johnson, who has been with us from the beginning, Commissioner Womack, who have stood by us. I just want to say thank you to all of them for the fight that they have put in to get the justice for Patrick.
Lakini hatutachoka kamwe mpaka tupate justice ya Patrick.
We are not going to be tired until when we get the justice for Patrick. Thank you.
Ben, this one's for you. How does this impact your civil trial, and can you provide an update on timeline?
It doesn't affect the criminal trial or civil trial, at all. Currently, we're waiting since the United States Supreme Court denied certiorari. In other words, they're not taking this case like the Schurr defense team asked them to. The case is in essence going to be back in Judge Maloney's hands. down in Kalamazoo at the United States District Court. And I anticipate we'll be meeting with Judge Maloney in the relative near future, where we'll be talking about deadlines that we have to meet, when we can take certain depositions and so forth. So I anticipate that we will be moving forward now without any further delays.
Question from Simon Shakat, WXYZ. What does it mean for you to see charges filed again in a new trial?
And that's Israel from Mama, please.
Okay, mama, wanakuuliza mnataka kuona ye kama bafungule tena hii kesi, position yenu iko aje?
Sisi mimi kama vile mama
Myself as a mother,
sitochoka.
we are not going to be tired.
Maana nilikuwa sichoki mtoto wangu
I didn't give up on my son.
na sitochoka mpaka sheria ichukuliwe kwa ajili ya mtoto wangu.
And we are not going to be tired until when we find the justice for our son.
Then what does this outcome suggest about the strength of the case or how it was presented, and will it impact any of your tactics on the civil side?
I think that by having a mistrial, it's somewhat of a mixed bag from a criminal law perspective. I am not a criminal law expert, so that's something that you folks can certainly reach out to those folks and talk about. However, what you know is this: you could not get 12-0. And remember, the burden in a criminal case, y'all, is beyond a reasonable doubt. It is a huge, high burden. And what you find out is either way, you couldn't get 12 people to agree. So it's somewhere in between that. Folks felt strongly about acquitting, meaning no, not guilty. And other folks felt very strongly about finding guilty. So in a situation like that, in police cases like this, that is often the case. One of the advantages of being a civil lawyer in a case like this, we're used to seeing that all the time. We have a lower burden of proof in the civil case. It's called by a preponderance of the evidence. Simply stated, if these are the scales of justice and they're even because the scales have nothing on it, having one marble, if you will, one pebble more on one side makes it more likely than not. That's all I have to prove. I personally think will prove far beyond that. But again, we do not have a beyond the reasonable doubt standard like they do in criminal law. So to me, as a civil lawyer, I think this shows that our civil case is extremely strong, and we will be moving forward with that belief, and we'll talk about as things materialize closer to trial.
There's a question for Patrick's parents. What do you say to the community who have been in your corner and calling for justice for Patrick?
Hii ni swali ya bazazi ya Patrick, kama pito tuana kujibia kusema se kitu gani ndio tena kusema kwa community yote yenye ilikuwa na shimama ngambo yako benye biko wanatafuta justice juu ya Patrick.
No, kwa ngambo ya community ya timu yenye inatafuta justice ya Patrick, naenda kuleta shukrani na kuwaelezea kama wasichoke, hata kama wanafanya hii mistrial, lakini wasichoke, waendelee kusupport, tukue si wote kitu kimoja, na tunaamini ya kuwa tutapata justice juu ya kifo cha Patrick.
On behalf of myself and the family, I just want to say thank you to the community that has been fighting for the justice and seeking justice for Patrick. And I just want to ask them to don't give up, to don't get tired. We will keep fighting until when we get justice. We get justice for Patrick. I want to say just thank you so much for standing up with us for all these 3 years. Thank you.
And let me give you folks just a real brief overview of the next steps as we understand them, on behalf of the family. Prosecutor Becker has the discretion under the law, as many of you know, to decide whether he chooses to move forward with a second trial or not. That is his decision. He shared with the family today his initial thoughts. He did not make any recommendations either way. And he asked us, which is beyond reasonable for a lawyer that has fought as hard as he has, especially in a hard-fought case like this, for well over a week of trial. And on top of that, now 3 to 4 days of jury deliberations. He needs some time to kind of let things sift through and process. He will then be making his decision. And he informed us that he will be notifying the family of his decision. And then, of course, he will be making that decision public. So when that becomes public, we will, of course, meet with the family and make the family available again. So right now we're relative to the criminal case, we're sitting back and trying to give Prosecutor Becker some time and space to process and do his job. And then he will advise us as to his next steps. So we, along with, I'm sure many folks in the public, will be anxiously awaiting his decision. And again, from a civil standpoint, there's no reason to wait, and we are ready, willing, and able to move forward in the prosecution of our civil case. Commissioner, go ahead.
Next question from April Van Buren, Michigan Public Radio. We heard new information and testimony about both police training and the possession of the taser in this case. Does any of the new information in this case change how you'll move forward in the civil case? Is there a chance you'll try to pursue the case continue to try to pursue the case against the city of Grand Rapids?
April, none of this information is new to me. I've been talking about this taser information from about a week of our representation, since I am very familiar with this type of taser and what the taser report showed. I knew that the tasers both had been spent. The whole drive stun allegation is it's a joke, and we'll be exposing that in our civil case. We have very strong experts that will talk about this as well. These are separate and distinct experts from who Prosecutor Becker used. So this is not new. If you heard any of the comments by the criminal defense attorneys about officer-created danger as to whether it belongs in a criminal case, notice they picked the words "in a criminal case." That's because the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, that is the controlling jurisdiction that we all live in down in Cincinnati, Ohio, has ruled for years and years of this thing called an officer-created danger. And what that means is, just like in this case, when Schurr created the danger, he never should have had his taser out when he deployed it. He violated his training when he deployed it, how he deployed it, failure to give a verbal warning, and having it so close to Patrick when he first took it out of his holster. All of these are violation not only of his training by the city of Grand Rapids, but also on the training of Axon, the company that makes the taser. And we will talk more about that. And when you create a danger by doing something against your training, you can't then turn around and blame Patrick. And that's what this case was. From the very beginning, they blamed Patrick for everything. Patrick, because he resisted under federal law, ladies and gentlemen, cannot have excessive, unreasonable, or deadly force used against him simply because he resisted. Folks don't understand that, and that is the law, has been the law. So none of this is new, and especially in a civil setting. Officer-created danger has been something that our circuit, the Sixth Circuit, has talked about for years. So this is not new, and we will be talking about that and utilizing that as part of our case here in the civil case.
Then I'll let you determine who this question can be posed to. Tessa Kresh from WLNS Lansing. What message do you want to send to the community, particularly other families impacted by police violence?
Well, number one, I want to again remind folks in the community that Prosecutor Becker stood up and did the right thing. And I think there are very few people in his position that would have done that. I respect that a great deal. Even though the jury did not convict, nor did they acquit in a case like this, in this case at least, again, he deserves full credit for standing up and doing the right thing. Relative to community violence, Commissioner Womack has done a great job and has been a voice of reason, and I would defer that to him.
I would just like to tell the city of Grand Rapids, the entire community, that our American justice system, even though there are still some flaws, that we have attorneys working daily trying to fix, and hopefully more politicians, we still have an American justice system that gives families and defendants an opportunities to present their case. And I'm just thankful that this community chose to follow that direction because burning up the community, the violence, none of that could have brought this family justice. And I think the family is close to justice. We're going to continue to support them, and we need the community to support them in that peaceful way as we stand by the Leoya family.
And I think it's important for the community and on both sides to understand there's a right to a jury trial. That happened here. The trial, Judge Mims did a great job and her staff, very difficult, very high exposure case, did a phenomenal job. There was a fair trial here to both sides. The jury decided by not deciding in essence. But again, you can't say there was no justice. The jury disagreed on what the evidence meant in terms of guilt or acquittal here. That is part of justice. So in terms of justice, although it may not be what the family and we believe the evidence supports, we respect that this is part of justice. And again, justice will be further defined in the criminal setting by Prosecutor Becker if he chooses to go forward. If he doesn't, that is his decision. And certainly justice will prevail, we believe, in the civil courts here in the upcoming next year to 2 years.
Question from Matthew Whitkos, Fox 17, Grand Rapids. To Patrick's parents, what went through their minds hearing Schurr's point of view during testimony?
Dorcas, please. Israel.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mama Dorcas, hii swali ya chini wanauliza sa nani Schurr alikuwa na panel témoignage yake. Kitu gani njo ilienda mu mafikiro yako? Ni nini njo ulikuwa unajisikia sasa alikuwa na panel iko naenda kutemwanye pale mbele?
Yani nimejisikia vibaya, tena vibaya sana. Kwa maana alivyoenda pale mimi nilifikiria kitu cha kwanza chenye ataanza nacho labda ni samani.
I felt bad because very, very bad because when he went there the first time, when he went to testify, my heart was bleeding. And the first thing I thought he would say coming from his mouth was going to say, I'm sorry to the family, to apologize for what he did wrong, but he didn't.
Lakini niliona kama vile ni mtu alikuwa hajali na alionyesha tu kama sasa vile hakuwa mwanadamu mwenzake, ni kama vile ameua kuku tu yenye haina mwenye nayo.
And it seemed like the way that he portrayed himself, it was like he had no remorse, he had no guilt, he didn't care that he took the life of a human being. It seemed like he only killed an animal. That's how he presented himself, because basically he did not show any emotion that he was wrong for what he did.
Peter?
Kwa ngambo yangu mimi wakati nimemwona wanamweka ule muuaji Christopher Schurr pale mbele, kwa kweli nilikuwa najua kama ni binadamu na aliona amefanya makosa kuua mwingine binadamu. Nikawazia kama ataomba huruma kwa familia, lakini niliona hakujali na alikuwa kama ni mtu mwenye furaha, hakutingizika hata na kitu chochote kile.
On my behalf also, when I saw him coming from up front over there to testify, I thought as a human being that he would feel the remorse, he would feel the pain that we went through, and he could apologize. But no, he didn't care. And also he displayed like he was joyful, he was happy for what he did. So that was really painful to me and to my entire family.
Na uongo yote yenye ametumia, nimeenda kuleta shukrani, lakini najua kama Mungu atatusaidia. Najua kama anaendelea kubeba damu ya Patrick kwenye kichwa chake.
And all the lies that he portrayed over there, all the lie that he spewed over there, I just want him to know, I just want to say thank you to God, because God will give us the justice. But I want him to know that he's still carrying the blood of Patrick on him and is responsible for the blood of Patrick. Thank you.
Another question for the family from Michael Krebs.
Family of Ven Johnson, the family of Patrick Leoya and their attorney, Ven Johnson, responding to the mistrial that, to the judge saying that this was a mistrial.
Yeah, so of course we heard from the Leoya family that of course they seemed a little disappointed that this was the outcome as they came on screen in that Zoom press conference. The father actually saying to see this, through for 3 years, the prosecutor in the case did fight very hard hard and, in his words, did a good job. He also mentioned that he's thanking the community for the support around Patrick Leoya as well. But at this point, what we can gather from this criminal trial moving to the civil case that we expect to move forward down in Kalamazoo, the attorney, Ven Johnson, saying that there's no impact on this decision or this case, the criminal case that is, as they move forward with that civil case. Again, that's down apparently down in Kalamazoo, according to that attorney there. But again, we do have reporters covering all sides of this. We've got, of course, Josh Albertus there, who's in the press briefing room where we just heard from the prosecution and defense. We also have Riley Mack and Callie Lichter, who have been covering this trial since day one. Josh, I want to start with you because we did go to the Leoya family as the defense attorney, Mr. Borgula, was going through his spiel there. Can you kind of give us a rundown of what he said in the courtroom?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a waiting phase, honestly, at this point. You're going to hear from our other reporters in just a second about this, but it's really just up to Prosecutor Chris Becker whether or not he's going to retry this case in the future. You're going to hear more about that in a second. But when we just got finished hearing from defense attorney, the defense, Matt Borgula, who kind of alluded for us, while Becker wouldn't really speak to it, the defense said, he believed that really the jury in this case, it seemed, was very inclined towards acquittal from his view, and so he doesn't think this would be retried. But given how much time has passed, given what we saw today in the form of a hung jury, I mean, we asked, what if this case is retried? I mean, what's your confidence level in a possible retrial? And he said they are basically, he believes they're in a stronger position for that, given all that we've seen. But again, we're just in that waiting period now to see what Prosecutor Becker does at this point. He also addressed some other things that happened in the case as well. There was also, if you remember, there was an allegation about, the judge potentially rolling her eyes in the case. He addressed that for reporters, and he said, demeanor suggested she may have had feelings about something in the case, but that was just his viewpoint on that. But again, we're just in a waiting period at this point for pretty much everybody.
Did he say how Schurr reacted to hearing that decision, Josh?
Yeah, what we know again is that this is not necessary. This is not the same as an acquittal. So we are all just, and I believe he indicated they're just waiting at this point to see what happens at this point. And he hadn't really talked to former Officer Schurr about, for example, the demonstrators outside. He said he hadn't really spoken to them about that at this point. But again, we're all kind of just waiting to see what the prosecutor is going to decide, and you're going to hear more about that in a minute.
Josh, something we did hear from the defense attorney there is his opinion on some of the testimony that we have even talked about on our live stream, the taser, as well as this idea of officer-created jeopardy. The defense attorney clearly calling out Seth Stoughton, who was that expert that talked about that officer-created jeopardy. He talked about that concept. What did he say? I mean, he clearly indicated he believed it was confusing for a jury in his press conference there.
And that's what I was just about to say. I mean, he was saying, basically some of the testimony that we heard was very confusing. I mean, you heard in his closing arguments as well. He made some arguments about, whether or not the prosecution's witnesses were contradicting each other on with these generally accepted practices and other specific elements of what they were giving to the jury at that point during the trial. I mean, that was a big point of contention throughout the case, whether or not to have these two experts, Nick Bloomfield and Seth Stoughton, testify on generally accepted practices and the like when it comes to use of force. So that's kind of what he indicated and kind of reiterated again here today, was that, some of that testimony was perhaps confusing, and whether or not that played in. I mean, he spoke to a little bit about, where he thought the jury's heads were. Again, he believed, the body as a whole may have been overwhelmingly inclined towards acquittal, but, again, I mean, we're just waiting to see whether or not they would have to retry that, whether or not those same kind of experts may make a reappearance in any sort of retrial. But again, I'm just going to reiterate, it's all hinges on what Prosecutor Chris Becker is going to decide next.
Josh, I want to ask you about Schurr actually taking the stand. What did the defense have to say about how important it was for Schurr to speak for himself?
Yeah, I believe the defense kind of signaled there it was kind of planned for him to do so in case anything really came up at that point. I mean, this was a critical part of the case. I mean, a lot of this case was about, the justification for the use of force, whether or not it was justified, whether it was reasonable for any reasonable officer in that situation to have used that kind of force. So, the Schurr testimony in particular, that's really the only person here who could have, gotten truly, genuinely into the mind of what was going on. I mean, whether or not the jury took everything he said as true or not from what he was feeling, that's of course was up to the jury, but that was such a staple of this case, and from what we heard there, that was kind of a plain decision.
So one of the things that we heard from the defense attorney there was that he says that the jury was overwhelmingly in favor of acquittal, kind of giving us a rough outline of what that conversation looked like. The prosecution didn't offer up any speculation on that or what their conversations led to, Josh. But one thing that they did offer up on the defense side here is the appeals process that could happen after all of this, after this entire trial. So that appeals process, he mostly spoke on that officer-created jeopardy scenario again. What did he say about that process and what they would look to do with an appeals court, if anything?
I mean, the if anything clause right there, Tanner, is really, again, what we've been speaking to this whole time, whether or not there would even be a retrial, whether or not there would be a different outcome in any potential retrial, and if the appeals process would be necessary at that point. But, you heard from some of our experts throughout the week, I believe, as well. I mean, some of the elements perhaps leading up to sort of building a case for an appeal, if that were to come to that. But, again, that's just, it's all hypothetical at this point because we just don't know yet what the prosecutor is going to decide, whether or not a retrial is going to be necessary, whether or not a retrial is going to happen, and whether or not, based on what would happen there, whether or not an appeals process would be necessary. So it's all kind of hypothetical at this point, and the answers are kind of going to come as these decisions are made. But as of yet, there's no decision there.
Certainly a waiting game.
Definitely, Josh. Thank you. We want to bring in Callie and Riley. This is the first time that we've been able to hear from Prosecutor Becker after this trial. I really want to get a sense of what he was talking about, Callie and Riley, in regards to the outcome of this trial.
He talked about what the question on everyone's mind is right now. What are we going to see moving forward? Of course, he said, he wasn't quite surprised by the mistrial that happened. He said when you look at other, officer-involved shooting cases or, other cases where law enforcement is involved, this is somewhat common outcome, a mistrial. He also pointed to the case out of, I believe, Memphis, dealing with, law enforcement and stuff along the lines of what we're seeing here in Grand Rapids. That was a mistrial at one point, and then, the officers, there was an outcome that came out this week. But then he also talked about, there isn't quite a confirmed timeline of, when he'll make a decision going forward on if there's going to be, a retrial, dismiss charges, etc., all of that. But he said, that will come soon. He doesn't want to string this along. He used those words. This has been going on for 3 years. He's talked to the Leoya family. He says that they're hurting. Again, it's been drawn out for a really long time. So he said the decision will come, somewhat soon, but not today. He said today, they need time to process. He talked with jury members, so hearing that and then, reassessing where to go forward from here.
Yeah, of course, we're hearing that is the big question, right? It hinges on both not only the prosecution's case, but of course the defense's case here. When he was asked about the jury in this situation, he really wasn't up for speculating or offering that conversation that he was apparently had with the jury. What can you guys tell us about his conversation, if what he did offer there during that conference?
Yeah, Tanner, he spoke on, right away, he spoke on how great of a jury he says this was. He says that this jury took the most notes he's ever seen, in a trial. And he said that they really did a good job. They asked important questions throughout this case. And I got the chance to ask him, seeing the outcome, do you have any kind of regrets about, the jury that you picked? And he said, no, I think this was the right jury for this case at this time. He spoke on what a great job they did. Someone asked what they kind of were focusing on, what were the issues that they were hung up on, and he spoke on the two major issues of this trial. One was the taser a dangerous weapon, and two, should we focus on the totality of the circumstances, or should we focus on the heat of the moment? So he said that the jury definitely did that, and that they did a great job with the facts they were presented with.
All right, Riley and Callie, we have to leave it there. We are going to join them back again here in just a few minutes as 13 on Your Side News at Noon begins. But again, a lot of things just came out of all three press conferences, all of them happening, I felt like boom, boom, and then the Leoya family happening while the defense was offering their comments as we reached a mistrial. So again, we have a mistrial in the case of Christopher Schurr, the trial of Christopher Schurr, that is. Of course, Chris Becker, really the defense side as well, kind of seeming a little disappointed in what happened today. Of course, that is expected, as I believe they were hoping for a resolution, and we heard about 6 or 7 days of testimony in all of this.
Towards the end, they were definitely saying that this isn't necessarily a win, because obviously a win for them is the acquittal of Schurr, but definitely taking in and grappling with the fact that there's a possibility that this trial could start all over again, in which they believe that this trial should not be retried.
Yeah, something that we're also waiting to see is if Christopher Schurr when and if he will leave the courthouse, because we have been staking that out. In the moments while we were in some of the press conferences, we did see who we believe the jury to be out of there and getting into a van. We also saw the Leoya family leave the courthouse, and ultimately we did see some of them in that Ven Johnson press conference. Here in about 15 seconds, we're going to start the noon and run through all of this.
Yeah, we're going to be breaking down everything. So if you have any questions, stick with us, because we're most likely going to be answering those questions once we start with 13 on Your Side at noon. But again, starting very shortly here now.
I want to verify that that's true, that you're unable to reach a verdict as a panel?
Correct.
Okay. And so what I'm going to do is declare a mistrial in this case.
Right now on 13 on Your Side at noon, jurors are unable to come to a consensus in the trial of Christopher Schurr as a judge declares mistrial.
Reaction from the prosecution and defense and the Leoya family attorneys. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tanner Holbrook.
And I'm Lauren Baker. 13 on Your Side at noon starts right now. We begin this noon hour with the trial of Christopher Schurr. The judge declared a mistrial after the jury was unable to reach a verdict.
13 on Your Side's Callie Lichter has been in the courtroom since the trial began on day one. She joins us live now from downtown Grand Rapids with more on the decision. Callie?
Lauren and Tanner, we knew that a mistrial could be an outcome in this case, but I think, getting that information at around 9:30 this morning definitely came as a surprise, at least to us, here in the media room. And this decision did not come with fireworks. As the judge and jury came back to the courtroom, the judge told the court she received a message the jury could not come to a decision. The jury confirmed they were deadlocked, and then Judge Christina Mims called a mistrial. Now, this decision has 3 potential repercussions, all in the hands of Kent County Prosecutor Chris Becker. There could be a future retrial. He could offer a plea deal, or he could just dismiss the case and Christopher Schurr could walk free. And again, this is all in the hands of Kent County Prosecutor Chris Becker, so we will just have to wait and see in the coming weeks, months, where this trial is heading next. Live at the Kent County Courthouse, I'm Callie Lichter, 13 on Your Side.
And after the verdict, Prosecutor Chris Becker and the defense attorney Matt Bergola held a news conference sharing their thoughts and decisions on the trial.
13 on Your Side's Joshua Alberta is covering that part of the story for us and joins us live with more on what they had to say. Josh, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, guys. Yeah, that was really the biggest question, right? Going into after we heard this hung jury decision, what Prosecutor Becker was going to do. Is he going to call a retrial? Is he going to not do so? Is this going to be the end of the road for this? We don't know. So we heard from Prosecutor Becker as he went into the media room here today just about an hour ago to speak with reporters about that decision. And that decision right now, he said, there's no decision. He's not making a decision right now, but at the same time, he doesn't want that really to drag out, he said. He mentioned one of the summer months in particular. He doesn't want it to drag out until then, so he's hoping to come to that decision sometime soon, but for now, there is no decision on whether or not this is going to be retried, whether or not we're going to have a new trial, whether or not there's going to be a new verdict or perhaps another hung jury. We don't know as of yet, but what he was speaking to there, some of what he had to say was about the jury. I mean, he really talked in length about the jury and the questions they were asking and how he felt the jury was really paying attention in this case, was really asking good questions. And so, you know, what he had to say about the jury was quite in depth, and I want you to take a look at what he had to say about the jury and the totality of this case as a whole as we kind of reflect on it now, and he makes his decision going forward in however much time he takes to make that decision. Take a look at what he said.
Just like just like we argued, just like the argument was, was was it the moment of the shot was fired? Was that what you're supposed to look at, or is it looking at the totality of the circumstances? More, I was arguing, was the taser a dangerous weapon or not a dangerous weapon? It's basically what you saw in the trial and what the two sides focused on, respectively. That's essentially what they were focusing on, which I appreciate. I mean, they definitely knew what the issues were, and it sounds like they had a very thorough debate on those. And they couldn't reach a decision, which is not uncommon. So I'm not criticizing them at all. I've never had a jury take that many notes and ask the amount of questions, and quite frankly, very good questions. So they were clearly engaged, clearly dedicated, and I appreciate their work they did.
And now, of course, you look at the defense as well. When we saw defense attorney Matt Borgula come in here right after Prosecutor Becker, we also had his thoughts on some of what happened in this case. He kind of told us, Becker wouldn't really allude to this, but the defense attorney kind of told us, in his belief, the jury was really overwhelmingly leaning towards an acquittal. In this case, he doesn't believe it should be retried. But again, for them on the defense side, this is really a waiting game to see as to what Prosecutor Becker is going to do when he makes that decision in the coming days, weeks, months, however long it takes for him to make that decision. But he kind of talked about what he believed the jury was leaning towards, or what they were indicating to him in his belief. Take a look at what he had to say there.
It goes back and forth. It just, it was communicated that it was, there was always a majority for acquittal on both. And I don't know whether or not, this is probably your next question, they all agreed to acquit on second-degree murder or not. That wasn't communicated to us one way or the other. When I asked before the mistrial was declared, I was asking for the judge to ask the jury whether they could, if they had reached unanimity as to count one, which was murder in the second degree, and she declined. She's not required to do that under the rules, but if they had reached a verdict on murder 2, then jeopardy would have attached and there wouldn't have been a retrial.
So for them at this point, as I said, this is kind of a waiting game at this point to see what the prosecutor is going to do. But, as you're kind of hearing, he doesn't believe there should be a retrial. But, as Prosecutor Becker is making that decision, he did also say, if he's open to hearing from him, he may hear from Prosecutor Becker. He may be in communication with Prosecutor Becker as he makes that decision. But for now, it's just up to him at this point, and we're going to have to wait and see what his conversations may look like and what decision he's going to come to.
And Josh, both sides were hoping for a specific outcome for each of their side. Did they say whether this mistrial was a win or lose for them from both the defense and prosecution?
We did hear from the defense today. He specifically said, this is not a win or lose situation because, it wasn't, in their view, it wasn't former officer Schurr's intent at any time to take a life. But, it's kind of similar to what we were hearing, from demonstrators on the street as this kind of week and a half played out here, was that, people were, no matter whether or not they took one support or the other, or didn't take a support, a lot of people were hoping that the community would kind of heal, and that this in their view, kind of as well, is not a win or lose situation no matter what happens, because someone did lose their life in this situation, and so that's not a win or lose. And what happens next is really going to impact the community, and they're hoping that the community will be able to heal from that or find a way forward at least from that. But a lot of people just saying, this is not win or lose, especially when you have a hung jury and there was no decision whatsoever. But no matter the decision, for a lot of people, it was not a win or lose situation.
Josh Albertus reporting live for us in downtown Grand Rapids at the courthouse. We appreciate your reporting, Josh. Thank you. All right, let's move on. Following the ruling for a mistrial, the family of Patrick Leoya and the legal team for their civil case against Christopher Schurr spoke out about this outcome. 13 on your side's Elena Holland heard what they had to say. Elena, good afternoon to you. How do they feel?
Hi, Tanner. Well, Patrick's mother and father today said they feel like this hurts. His father, Peter, said through an interpreter he's bleeding in pain. This has, of course, brought up a lot of emotions from the time of when their son died. They have been preparing, think about this, for this trial for the past 3 years. They thought this would finally give them some closure, give them some justice, they said. Patrick's mother, Dorcas, said he was hurt, said that she was hurt. Schurr never came out and apologized to their family, and she thought he being Schurr, showed no remorse and acted as if he had just killed an animal, not her son. Here's a look a little bit at what they both had to say.
But also, I want to say that it hurt my family, my wife. We are bleeding, we are in pain. But I would like to thank all my legal team that have stood by me and my family have been fighting, and all the activists, all the members of the community who stood by us and fight, and will continue to fight until when we get the true justice for Patrick. We are not going to be tired.
Nilikuwa sichoki mtoto wangu.
I didn't give up on my son.
Na sitochoka mpaka sheria ichukuliwe kwa ajili ya mtoto wangu.
And we are not going to be tired until when we find the justice for our son.
Meanwhile, Ben Johnson, who is the attorney for the Leoya family in this civil case, says he thanks Prosecutor Becker for his work on this trial, and he urges him to move forward with a retrial. Of course, as Josh mentioned, Becker has not said he will make a decision, not said when he's going to make a decision on this yet, but he will not drag his feet on a decision or not to do a retrial. Johnson said this outcome does not affect the civil case, and they plan to move forward with prosecution in civil court. Lauren.
Thank you. The family of both sides had little reaction to today's decision. 13 on your side, Riley Mack was inside the courtroom when the mistrial was declared. She joins us live with that part of our coverage. Riley, what was it like inside there?
Absolutely, Lauren. I waited 20 hours through that jury deliberation. I was sitting on the floor outside the courtroom in the hallway, just waiting to be let into that courtroom to see the reactions to that verdict. We were only allowed one, video camera allowed in that courtroom, so we needed someone in there to get all the reactions, and luckily I was able to see it all. From the moment I walked in there at 9:30 this morning, you could hear a pin drop in that room. It was silent, and the air kind of felt tense in there. Some of Schurr's loved ones were praying, some were taking deep breaths. It was just a really quiet atmosphere of this, what it's kind of been this whole trial, this hurry up and wait. We sat there for about 20 minutes until the judge came in, and immediately she announced that, this trial would be a mistrial because of the hung jury. And then the jury came in, they said this is true. The reaction in the courtroom, there was no you expect this big reaction to a verdict being read, and that certainly was not the case here. Some people were kind of let out a breath of air, and it just goes to show kind of, an underwhelming reaction to kind of an underwhelming end to this case that has caused, strife in Grand Rapids for 3 years now, that still has not come to a conclusion here.
All right, Riley, thank you very much. We are going to get back to our coverage of the Christopher Schurr trial here in just a moment. We are following breaking news from Vatican City, where white smoke has been seen from the Sistine Chapel chimney there. As you can see, we have onlookers appearing very excited as that white lift of smoke, smoking from the chimney. The white smoke there is coming out of the chimney. This is a signal from the conclave that a new pope has been chosen. We do not know at this point who that pope is. Of course, this is just happening as we were watching. It's 6:12 there at the Vatican, and of course, we are 6 hours behind. So in the hours to come, we're going to certainly learn who that new pope is, as we now have white smoke from the Vatican.
Yes, let's go back to our coverage. So here, throughout the trial, we've seen crowds gather outside the courthouse, which often led to shouting matches, some violence, and at least one arrest.
Yeah, but today, after the mistrial was declared, very few people were outside the courthouse. 13 on your side's Aaron Sullivan and Deja Barrett join us live from downtown Grand Rapids. Deja, Aaron, good afternoon to you. What was the mood like where you two are?
Tanner Lauren, that mood calm and quiet for most of the morning. Not a whole lot of commotion and reaction from this morning's announcement. And we're here outside the Kent County Courthouse. A few demonstrators supporting Patrick Leoya. You can see here being vocal. A handful still out here, expressing their concerns, but not a whole lot of reaction. Now, we will have to say the folks we spoke to this morning have mainly been Leoya supporters, and we have not seen any Christopher Schurr supporters out here this morning compared to what you've seen this week, right?
Right, Deja. You know, we were really surprised to see a lot of the Schurr supporters did leave very early in the morning. Now, right now, there are people here only for Leoya. We did speak to one person here who did want to go on camera and say, his stance on this opinion. And he really hopes in the future that the people of Grand Rapids can come together and all make the same agreement for this next time they make any sort of verdict in a future trial.
And we do have a listen to that sound right here.
It's 2 lives that's going to be lost here. You know, it's just not the guy that lost his life and the police that is being judged right now. You know, it's sad, for both sides. But, there's a thin line. And like I said, when do the chase stops? And far as the judges and them coming to a decision, everybody has an opinion. And their decision, we have to accept that because we are the people.
And Deja, I know a lot of the demonstrators have been telling us that they're going to be here again tonight.
Right, yes, they've been telling us that, and they have signage that a rally or protest of some sort will be held this evening at 5 o'clock in support of Patrick Leoya. And again, just a quiet here said outside the Kent County Courthouse, and this is what we've seen following the reaction of that mistrial. So for Aaron Sullivan and myself, reporting live outside the Kent County Courthouse, 13 on your side.
Ladies, thank you. There was a police presence outside the courthouse as we waited for Christopher Schurr and the family to leave.
13 on your sides, Micah Cho was positioned in the back of the courthouse. He's been watching that parking ramp like a hawk for us this morning and pretty much for the entire day today. He joins us now live to see what he could see. All right, good afternoon, Micah. What did you see out there?
Yeah, hi Tanner. We've been here since probably about 10 o'clock this morning. Just probably about 2 hours ago, there were dozens of Kent County Sheriff's deputies and Michigan State police officers lined up right behind me. And now it looks like we're just down to about 3 Michigan State police officers on bikes. Or just maybe about an hour ago, that white shuttle van right there, it was actually loaded up. There are about maybe 12 to 14 people piled into it. We do believe, we're just speculating at this point, but we do believe that was the jury. Now again, we are out here waiting to see if Christopher Schurr and his family come out and leave the courthouse, either through this side door right here or possibly through that garage right down there. But again, yeah, we do believe that was the jury that left here maybe about an hour ago. And so we've just been on watch ever since. When that jury did leave, there was the street was closed off. There was about 4 to 6 officers in the road kind of controlling traffic here. And so it's much quieter now than, it's been quiet all morning, but it's much quieter now here at this 12 o'clock hour with the diminishing amount of police officers that are out here. So we are going to keep an eye out. We're going to stay out here as long as possible, and we're going to keep an eye on this. So, and we'll let you know if we hear anything. For now, in Grand Rapids, Micah Cho for 13 on your side.
We got plenty of more to cover. Let's bring in Callie Lichter and Riley Mack to kind of walk us through some more debrief of this trial. A lot has happened today, ladies. What can you tell us?
Yeah, so I mean, what I've been saying, we were expecting, you know, a mistrial could be an outcome of the past couple of weeks that we've been here at the courthouse, but I don't think any of us were really expecting that that decision would come around 9:30 a.m. We know that a couple of days ago, the jury came back, told Judge Christina Mims that they were deadlocked, and she encouraged them to go back into deliberation. You know, it's their job as jurors to come to a verdict, maybe hear each other out, find some common ground, you know, in order to get some type of closure, what that may be, with a verdict in this case. But here, you know, they came back today saying they were deadlocked, and instead of giving, you know, that instruction saying go back, deliberate again on the fourth day of deliberation, it was kind of, you know, just, all right, I'm going to declare a mistrial. You guys are dismissed. You're going to get some questions asked to you by both, you know, the defense and the prosecution. So you'll be taken back to the room, but yeah, then you're dismissed. So, you know, after some heated testimony, cross-examination, very high emotions in the courtroom, you know, this kind of, there was no fireworks, no bang, as, you know, one would describe it. It is what it is. She said it was mistrial. And that was it. But I mean, Riley was inside the courtroom when that decision was made, so she can more speak to it.
Absolutely, it's just as you described it. You expect the end of this, you know, really high-profile case, one of the highest profile in recent Kent County history, to end with this, you know, massive fireworks show and a verdict. You know, for everyone to see that this is the outcome of this case, and you know, that's not coming, at least for now. So the reaction here is kind of, you know, one of disappointment a little bit. Both attorneys kind of spoke in their press conferences about their, you know, kind of disappointment that there is no outcome at this point. He's not innocent, he's not guilty. And they both spoke on that, and I think that was, you know, the question is, what did the jury do? You know, what happened with the jury there? And both of them said this was a great jury, that the jury did their best. Ultimately, they took great notes, they asked great questions, they just couldn't come to that decision. So yeah, it just goes to show this, you know, there is so many emotions about this case, and you know, this group of 12 Kent County residents couldn't come to one.
All right, Riley Mack and Callie Lichter reporting inside court, of course, outside on the right side. If we could take that again as we kind of round out our 12 o'clock show here. We were looking at another police presence just outside. There is all right, let's get to Micah Cho, who's live right now monitoring those developments. What's going on? We've got about 30 seconds here, Micah.
Yeah, we'll make this quick. There was 3 officers on bikes out here, and now we have the same amount of police presence that we saw earlier this morning when the jury was leaving. So this is new activity here. That shuttle bus driver just entered back into the shuttle bus. He's been out for maybe about an hour now. But yeah, we are monitoring. It looks like we have more officers coming out of the courthouse. We have 3 Michigan State police officers here and maybe less than a dozen sheriff's deputies. Looks like we have 1 heavily armed sheriff's deputy talking to another over there by the door. So yeah, we are monitoring the situation. We do believe that he may be leaving soon.
All right, and Micah, any indication as to what we're expecting here in the next couple minutes as we monitor this? Any indication on who exactly might be coming out? Could we be seeing Chris Schurr here?
Yeah, we could. That's a very good possibility. We have heard that he's been dropped off and picked up on this location multiple times during this trial, and we have heard that it was kind of a white van that has been picking him up after trial has been over with. So it looks like there are some deputies kind of entering that shuttle bus as well. yeah, this is, it's very possible that his family could be coming out. There's also a possibility he could be coming out of the parking ramp that's right next, it's kind of just maybe 10 feet to the right there, that underground parking ramp. So we will be monitoring this as well. But yeah, it looks like there's just more and more cops that are, police officers that are just entering out here outside the back of the courthouse.
Yeah, and you can see that those officers appear to be in full tactical gear. They've got bulletproof vests, it looks like, on there that say police. And of course, you see sheriff's deputies in the foreground of this shot as well. Heavy police presence there. Of course, we are unsure as to whether Christopher Schurr has made his way out of the building. This could be a quote-unquote a line for him so he can get out safely if that is going to be him in this situation.
But of course, we'll be monitoring this, and once we are able to update you all, we will on air and online, and also continue our coverage as the day goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, we're going to continue to have coverage on this, and of course, we have reporters, as you can see, spread all the way around, getting the latest on the story. By the way, you can also rewatch the entire trial as well as that mistrial verdict that came down early this morning on our streaming app 13 Plus. Download on your TV and watch for free. We're now going to go to a special report as the papal conclave appears to have settled on a new pope. White smoke out of the Sistine Chapel steeple there. Let's go there now.
Famous words.